The bullet shattered the Monaco hotel window 3 seconds after Naomi Carter stepped away from it. Glass exploded across marble floors while armed men in black tactical gear surrounded Kang Min-jae, the most feared Korean mafia boss in Asia, his hand instinctively reaching for the woman he'd sworn never to touch. His secretary, his weakness, the one person capable of destroying everything he'd built. Blood dripped from a shallow cut across Naomi's cheek as Min-jae's eyes went dead cold, and she realized something terrifying. She wasn't afraid of the assassins outside. She was afraid of what he would become to protect her. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and stay until the end, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about power, obsession, and the kind of love that burns entire empires to the ground. Soul kick. Soul bled neon through rain-soaked streets the night Kang Min-jae learned he was capable of jealousy. He stood inside his penthouse office 60 floors above Gangnam, watching water streak down floor-to-ceiling windows while listening to reports about territorial disputes with the Busan Syndicate. Numbers scrolled across 3 monitors mounted against black marble walls. Shipping manifests. Casino revenues. Political contributions funneled through shell corporations registered in 12 different countries. His criminal empire generated $8 billion annually, controlled by a man who treated human emotion like a structural weakness waiting to collapse empires. Min-jae built his reputation on that coldness. The Black Tiger of Gangnam never flinched during interrogations, never hesitated before ordering executions, never allowed sentiment to compromise strategic decisions. Other mafia bosses feared him precisely because he operated like a machine designed solely to accumulate power and eliminate threats. Then Naomi Carter walked into his organization 2 years ago, and everything Min-jae believed about his own emotional control started cracking apart. She arrived through a legitimate staffing agency, hired as a temporary administrative assistant during a corporate expansion. 28 years old, Black American, Columbia graduate with a degree in international relations and fluency in 3 languages. Her resume listed nothing remarkable beyond competence and professionalism. What the resume didn't mention was the way Naomi Carter moved through dangerous rooms like she understood exactly where the bodies were buried. Most people working inside Min-jae's legitimate business operations had no idea their CEO controlled half of South Korea's underground economy. They saw a brilliant tech investor, a philanthropist, a Harvard-educated businessman who built successful companies across Asia and North America. Naomi figured it out within 3 weeks. She never said anything directly, never asked inappropriate questions. But Min-jae watched her carefully catalog which meetings ended with men leaving through back exits, which phone calls required empty conference rooms and encrypted lines, which wire transfers disappeared into accounts that didn't appear on any official documentation. She knew. And she stayed anyway. That should have been the first warning. Instead, Min-jae found himself assigning her progressively more sensitive work. Scheduling that required coordinating with men who ran illegal gambling operations. Travel arrangements that involved private jets landing at airports without customs oversight. Document preparation for transactions that existed entirely outside legal frameworks. Naomi never flinched. She organized his calendar with the same calm efficiency, whether he was meeting venture capitalists or negotiating territory with Yakuza leadership. Prepared briefing materials for charity galas and underground arms, deals with identical professionalism. Answered late-night calls about corporate acquisitions and emergency criminal proceedings without ever asking why her boss needed a secretary working at 3 in the morning. Within 6 months, she became indispensable. Within a year, Min-jae realized she was the only person in his organization he actually trusted. By year 2, he understood he was completely fucked. The realization arrived in Monaco. Min-jae attended an annual summit hosted by a European consortium of organized crime families operating across 4 continents. The gathering disguised itself as an exclusive investment conference held at a luxury resort overlooking the Mediterranean. 50 of the world's most dangerous criminals spent 5 days discussing territorial agreements, technology sharing, and joint operations while pretending to be legitimate businessmen interested in emerging markets. Min-jae brought Naomi as his executive assistant. Standard practice. She'd accompanied him to dozens of international meetings. Her presence provided perfect cover. wealthy Asian businessman traveling with his competent American secretary looked infinitely less suspicious than a mafia boss arriving alone. But Monaco felt different from the moment they landed. The resort sprawled across a private peninsula, accessible only through guarded checkpoints. Marble villas surrounded infinity pools overlooking turquoise water. Staff moved silently through landscaped gardens, trained to see nothing and remember less. Security swept every room twice daily. Conversations happened in encrypted conference areas or during long walks along empty beaches. Naomi handled it exactly like she handled everything else, calmly, professionally, and with the kind of quiet competence that made Min-jae's chest feel uncomfortably tight whenever he watched her work. She organized his meeting schedule, prepared briefing packets analyzing each family's recent territorial movements, coordinated secure communications with his operations in Seoul, translated when necessary, took notes when required, stood silently in corners during negotiations that involved discussions of murder, extortion, and international weapons trafficking without ever changing expression. Perfect secretary, perfect cover, perfect woman. That last thought arrived uninvited at 2 a.m. on their third night in Monaco. Min-jae stood on his villa's balcony, smoking a cigarette he didn't actually want while watching moonlight reflect off the Mediterranean. His mind churned through syndicate politics and strategic alliances instead of allowing anything resembling rest. Naomi's villa sat 50 yards away across landscaped grounds. Her lights were off. She was probably asleep like any normal person would be at this hour. Min-jae wondered if she ever thought about him the way he thought about her. Then he crushed that thought immediately and went back inside. Weakness got you killed in his world. Caring about someone gave enemies a target. Min-jae had watched his own father get murdered because he'd been stupid enough to love Min-jae's mother. Watched his uncle torture that same mother to death trying to force information about hidden assets. Watched his entire family get erased by betrayal that started with sentiment and ended with blood. He'd sworn never to make the same mistake. So Min-jae buried whatever he felt for Naomi beneath layers of professional distance and emotional control. Treated her with the same cold courtesy he showed everyone else. Never allowed his eyes to linger too long. Never touched her unless absolutely necessary. Never let himself imagine what her mouth would taste like or how her skin would feel beneath his hands. Never let himself feel anything at all. That strategy worked perfectly until the sunscreen incident. It happened on their 4th afternoon in Monaco. The summit schedule included a poolside reception where families mixed socially between formal negotiations. Min-jae attended out of obligation, wearing linen pants and a black shirt, projecting the image of a relaxed businessman enjoying Mediterranean luxury. Naomi sat near the pool's edge wearing a simple navy one-piece swimsuit and oversized sunglasses, reviewing notes on her tablet. She'd pulled her hair back into a bun. Sunlight caught the warm brown tones of her skin. She looked completely absorbed in work despite sitting poolside at a criminal summit on the French Riviera. Min-jae found himself watching her instead of circulating among the families. Then Kim Tae-young walked over to her. Tae-yang served as Min-jae's head of security, a former Korean Special Forces operator responsible for coordinating protection during international travel. Loyal, competent, trusted enough to know every detail of Min-jae's criminal operations. Tae-young said something to Naomi that made her glance up from her tablet. She smiled slightly, then nodded. Tae-young sat down beside her, holding a bottle of sunscreen. Min-jae felt something sharp twist inside his chest. He told himself he was just ensuring proper security protocols, making sure his secretary stayed safe. That was all. Perfectly reasonable concern for a valuable employee. He started walking toward them. Tae-young squeezed sunscreen onto his palm and reached toward Naomi's shoulders. Min-jae's vision tunneled. His hands clenched involuntarily. Heart rate spiked. Every muscle in his body went rigid with something that felt dangerously close to violence. He watched Tae-young's fingers touch Naomi's skin, gentle, careful, completely innocent, and wanted to break every bone in the man's hand. The rational part of Min-jae's brain screamed that this was insane. Tae-young was preventing sunburn, providing basic assistance, doing absolutely nothing inappropriate. The other part wanted to drag his security chief into the Mediterranean and hold him underwater until he stopped moving. Min-jae reached them before he'd fully processed his own reaction. "Is there a problem?" His voice came out colder than he'd intended. Naomi looked up, clearly surprised. Just sunscreen, I couldn't reach my shoulders. Taeyong stood immediately, reading Min Jae's expression with the instincts of someone trained to detect threats. Sir, I was just... You're needed inside. Min Jae cut him off. Security briefing, now. There was no security briefing. Taeyong knew it. Naomi probably knew it too. But Taeyong nodded once and disappeared toward the resort without argument. Silence stretched between Min Jae and Naomi. She tilted her head slightly, studying him through dark sunglasses. That was interesting? What was interesting? You look like you wanted to murder your own security chief. Min Jae's jaw tightened. I need you to review the briefing materials for tomorrow's meeting. I've already reviewed them twice. Then review them again. Naomi removed her sunglasses slowly, folding them with deliberate care. Her dark eyes met his with an expression he'd never seen before, something calculating and dangerous and entirely unafraid. You were jealous, she said quietly. Min Jae felt ice flood his veins. That's inappropriate, but accurate. You're my secretary. I'm aware of my job title. She stood, picking up her tablet. I'm also aware that you just dismissed your head of security for applying sunscreen. So either you've developed an irrational hatred of UV protection or something else is happening here. Every instinct Min Jae possessed screamed at him to shut this conversation down immediately. Retreat behind professional distance. Remind her of proper boundaries. End this before it went somewhere neither of them could come back from. Instead, he heard himself say, "Put your sunglasses back on." Naomi's eyebrows lifted slightly. Why? Because when you look at me like that, I start thinking about things that have nothing to do with briefing materials. The words landed between them like a grenade with the pin already pulled. Naomi went very still. Her expression shifted through several emotions too quickly for Min Jae to track. Surprise. Confusion. Something that looked dangerously like hope. Then she smiled. Not her professional secretary smile, not the polite expression she wore during business meetings. This smile was slow and knowing and absolutely lethal to every wall Min Jae had built around himself. You're full of surprises, Mr. Kang. Don't. Don't what? Don't look at me like that. Like what? Like you're not afraid of me. Naomi stepped closer. Near enough that Min Jae could smell her sunscreen and the faint scent of chlorine from the pool. Near enough that he had to clench his hands into fists to stop himself from reaching for her. I've worked for you for 2 years, she said softly. I've watched you negotiate with arms dealers, authorize eliminations, restructure entire criminal operations without blinking. I know exactly who you are and what you're capable of. Then you should be running, maybe. Her voice dropped lower. Or maybe I stopped being your secretary somewhere along the way and became something else entirely. Min Jae couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Every carefully constructed rule he'd built around this woman was disintegrating. Nothing can happen between us, he said, but his voice had lost all conviction. Why not? Because I don't do relationships. I don't do emotions. I built my life on control, and you. He stopped, searching for words that wouldn't reveal how completely she'd already destroyed that control. You make me want things I can't afford to want. Naomi studied his face for a long moment. Then she put her sunglasses back on, picked up her tablet, and turned toward her villa. For what it's worth, she said over her shoulder, I've wanted you since the first time I walked into your office and realized the successful businessman was actually a crime lord pretending to be civilized. So if you ever decide control isn't worth the loneliness, you know where to find me. Then she walked away, leaving Min Jae standing alone beside a pool in Monaco while his entire carefully ordered world collapsed inward. He returned to Seoul the next day, cutting the summit short with a manufactured excuse about emergency business requiring immediate attention. Taeyong arranged transportation without comment. Naomi packed efficiently and asked no questions. The flight back lasted 14 hours. Min Jae spent all of them pretending to work while hyper-aware of Naomi sitting in the adjacent seat, reviewing documents on her laptop like nothing had changed. Everything had changed. They landed at Incheon at 6 in the morning local time. Min Jae's driver waited on the tarmac beside a black Mercedes SUV. Seoul sprawled beneath gray clouds, familiar and suffocating. Take Ms. Carter to her apartment, Min-jae instructed his driver. Then to Naomi, take the day off. We'll resume normal schedule tomorrow. She nodded once. Thank you, sir. The formality felt like a knife between his ribs. Min-jae went directly to his penthouse office, answered accumulated messages, reviewed reports about territorial disputes with the Busan syndicate that had escalated during his absence, approved 3 eliminations, restructured shipping routes, moved $8 million through offshore accounts. Normal operations. Everything exactly as it should be. Except his hand shook slightly when he picked up his phone and saw Naomi's contact information. He put the phone down, poured whiskey, stared at Seoul through his windows, and told himself he'd done the right thing, maintained professional distance, protected them both from the inevitable disaster that would follow if he allowed himself to feel anything. His phone buzzed with an incoming message. Unknown number. Encrypted. Min-jae opened it. A photograph appeared on screen, taken from long range, slightly grainy, but clear enough to identify. Naomi, walking into her apartment building that morning. The message that followed contained no words. Just a symbol Min-jae recognized immediately, the mark of the Busan syndicate. His blood went cold. Then his private line rang. Min-jae answered without speaking. Kang Min-jae. The voice belonged to Choi Dae-sung, the leader of the Busan organization. We've been watching you, and we've noticed something interesting. Min-jae said nothing. Min-jae, you brought a woman to Monaco, your secretary. Very pretty, very close to you. Dae-sung's voice carried amusement. We did some research. Naomi Carter, American, Columbia graduate, works directly with you on sensitive matters. Tell me, Min-jae, how much is she worth to you? Min-jae's hand tightened around his phone, hard enough that the screen cracked. If you touch her, there it is. Dae-sung laughed. The great black tiger actually cares about something, about someone. That's a weakness we can work with. The line went dead. Min-jae stood frozen in his office, staring at the shattered phone screen while his mind raced through scenarios. Security protocols, threat assessments, response options. Naomi was already compromised. Every enemy he'd ever made now knew exactly how to hurt him. He'd spent 2 years trying to protect her by maintaining distance. He'd failed, and now keeping her safe would require bringing her into his world completely, or losing her forever. Min-jae made his decision in less than 10 seconds. He grabbed his keys and headed for the elevator. 20 minutes later, he stood outside Naomi's apartment, knocking harder than necessary. She opened the door wearing sweatpants and a Columbia t-shirt, hair still wet from a shower. Her expression shifted from surprise to concern the moment she saw his face. What happened? Min-jae pushed inside and closed the door behind him. Pack a bag. Essential items only. You have 10 minutes. I don't understand. The Busan syndicate knows about you. They sent me your photograph. Threatened you directly. His voice came out harder than he intended. You're not safe here anymore. Naomi went pale but didn't panic. What do you need me to do? Pack. Now. I'm taking you somewhere secure until I handle this. She stared at him for 3 seconds. Then she moved. Min-jae watched her disappear into her bedroom, listened to drawers opening and closing, and felt something shift fundamentally inside his chest. He'd told himself for 2 years that caring about Naomi would make him weak. He'd been wrong. Caring about her made him lethal, because anyone stupid enough to threaten the woman he loved was about to learn exactly why people called him the Black Tiger of Gangnam. Naomi emerged 8 minutes later carrying a small black duffel bag. She'd changed into jeans and a dark sweater, pulled her hair back. Her face showed no fear, just the same calm competence she brought to every crisis. Ready, she said simply. Min-jae led her downstairs to where Tae-young waited beside an unmarked vehicle. His security chief's expression remained carefully neutral, but Min-jae saw the question in his eyes. Miss Carter is being relocated to the estate, Min-jae said. No one outside our inner circle knows. Full security protocols. Treated as a level 1 threat. Tae-young nodded once. Understood, sir. They drove north out of Seoul into mountain country, where Min-jae maintained a private compound, unknown to anyone outside his most trusted advisors. The estate sprawled across 40 heavily forested acres, protected by biometric gates, underground bunkers, and ex-military security teams loyal enough to die protecting what lived inside those walls. Min-jae had built it as an emergency fallback position 5 years ago. He never imagined he'd be bringing Naomi here. They arrived just after noon. Tae-yong cleared them through 3 separate security checkpoints before the main house came into view. A modernist structure built into the mountainside, all glass and steel and natural stone, designed to be both beautiful and defensible. Naomi stared at it through the vehicle's windows. "You built a fortress," she said quietly. "I built insurance." "Against what?" "Against losing the things that matter." She turned to look at him, and Min-jae saw understanding dawn in her eyes. Tae-yong parked near the main entrance. Min-jae dismissed him with instructions to coordinate perimeter security and update threat assessments hourly. Then they were alone. Min-jae led Naomi inside. The house opened into a 2-story living area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking forested mountains. Afternoon sunlight streamed across polished concrete floors. Everything was clean and minimal and completely impersonal, more bunker than home. "There are 4 bedrooms upstairs," Min-jae said, falling back into operational briefing mode because it was safer than acknowledging what bringing her here actually meant. "Take whichever you want. Kitchen is fully stocked. Security team is on site 24 hours. You're completely safe here." Naomi set her bag down slowly. "How long am I staying?" "Until I eliminate the threat." "You mean until you kill whoever's targeting me?" Min-jae didn't answer. Naomi stepped closer to him, near enough that he could see gold flecks in her dark eyes. "I need you to be honest with me about something." "What?" "Is this really about my safety, or is this about you finally admitting you feel something?" Min-jae's jaw tightened. "It's about keeping you alive." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer that matters." "No." Her voice went soft and dangerous. "What matters is whether you brought me here because someone threatened your secretary, or because someone threatened the woman you love." The word love hit Min-jae like a physical blow. He'd spent 2 years refusing to even think it, hiding behind professional distance and emotional control, pretending what he felt was anything less than complete obsession. And now Naomi stood in his hidden fortress, staring at him with those impossibly knowing eyes, demanding truth he'd never given anyone. "I don't do love," he said, but his voice shook. "Yes, you do." Naomi moved even closer, until only inches separated them. "You do it the same way you do everything else, completely, obsessively, and with terrifying intensity. You've been in love with me for months, maybe longer, and the only reason you're finally admitting it is because someone gave you an excuse." Min-jae's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "If I love you, you become the weapon every enemy uses against me. I became that weapon the moment I walked into your office 2 years ago. The only thing that's changed is you're finally being honest about it. Honesty gets people killed in my world. And lying to yourself is better?" She reached up and pressed her palm flat against his chest, right over his heart. "You can feel this. I know you can. Your heart's racing. You're terrified, not of the Busan Syndicate or anyone else threatening me. You're terrified of admitting you're human." Min-jae caught her wrist but didn't push her away. "Being human is a weakness I can't afford." "Then maybe you need to decide what you can afford to lose." Naomi's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Your reputation as an emotionless monster, or the woman standing in front of you who's been in love with you since Monaco?" Something inside Min-jae's chest cracked wide open. He pulled Naomi against him hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs, buried his face against her neck, felt her arms wrap around him, allowed himself one moment of complete surrender to the thing he'd been fighting for 2 years. "I can't protect you if I love you," he whispered against her skin. "You can't protect me if you don't." Min-jae pulled back just enough to see her face. "Everyone I've ever loved died because I was stupid enough to care about them." "Then I guess we're both taking that risk." Naomi reached up and touched his face with heartbreaking gentleness. "Because I'm not leaving. Not now. Not ever. So you can either keep pretending this isn't happening, or you can kiss me and we'll figure out the rest together." Min-jae stared at her for 3 seconds, while his entire world reorganized itself around this woman. Then he kissed her. Not gentle, not careful. 2 years of repressed want and desperate need poured into that kiss. Naomi made a sound low in her throat and kissed him back just as hard, her fingers tangling in his hair, her body pressed completely against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Min-jae pressed his forehead against hers. I'm going to kill everyone who threatened you, he said quietly. I know. And then I'm going to make sure no one ever threatens you again. I know that too. You're not my secretary anymore. Naomi smiled against his mouth. What am I? Mine. She pulled back slightly, studying his face. That's very possessive for someone who claims not to do relationships. I don't do normal relationships. Min Jae's voice went dark and absolutely certain. But I'll do whatever this is. You, me, all of it, even if it burns my entire empire down. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. I'm a criminal. Romance isn't my specialty. Lucky for you, I prefer honesty. She kissed him once more, soft and sweet. Now tell me your actual plan for handling the Busan syndicate. Min Jae felt a fierce surge of something that might have been joy. You want operational details? I've been coordinating your criminal empire for 2 years. Yes, I want operational details. He laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months. Then his phone buzzed with an incoming message. Taeyang, perimeter breach, multiple hostiles, 3 minutes out. Min Jae's blood went cold. He grabbed Naomi's hand and pulled her toward the stairs. Underground safe room, now. What's happening? They found us faster than I expected. His mind raced through defensive protocols while his body moved on pure instinct. The estate is designed for this. You'll be safe in the bunker. Reinforced steel, independent systems. Even if they breach the house, they won't reach you. They reached the master bedroom. Min Jae pressed his palm against a biometric scanner hidden in the wall. A panel slid open, revealing a staircase leading down into darkness. Go, he ordered. Naomi didn't move. What about you? I'll handle them. Like hell you will. She grabbed his arm. You're not going out there alone. Naomi? No. Her voice went hard. You don't get to bring me into your world and then lock me away the first time things get dangerous. If we're doing this, we're doing it together. Gunfire erupted somewhere outside the house. Min Jae looked at this woman, this impossible, brilliant, terrifying woman who'd somehow become the center of his entire universe, and made a decision that went against every strategic instinct he possessed. Stay behind me, he said. Do exactly what I say, and if I tell you to run, you run. Naomi nodded once. Min Jae led her back downstairs, moving quickly toward the armory concealed behind false walls in the study. He armed himself with practiced efficiency, handgun, backup weapon, tactical vest. Then he pulled out a second handgun and handed it to Naomi. She checked the magazine automatically, chambered around, and looked at him with steady eyes. You know how to use that, Min Jae said. Not a question. I grew up in Detroit. My father taught me to shoot when I was 12. Another piece of information Min Jae filed away about this woman who kept surprising him. The sound of breaking glass came from somewhere upstairs. Min Jae's phone buzzed. Taeyang. 8 hostiles inside the perimeter. Security team engaged. Need immediate support. They're already in the house, Min Jae said quietly. Naomi's grip tightened on her weapon. Then let's make sure they regret it. Min Jae looked at her one more time. Really looked at her, memorizing this moment before everything changed forever. Then he took her hand and led her toward the sound of men trying to kill them both. Because somewhere between Monaco and Seoul, between professional distance and complete surrender, Naomi Carter had stopped being his secretary and become the only thing in the world Kang Min Jae couldn't afford to lose. And anyone stupid enough to threaten her was about to learn exactly how far a man like him would go to protect the woman he loved. The first hostile came through the kitchen entrance, moving fast and low, tactical gear dark against stainless steel appliances. Min Jae put 2 rounds center mass before the man registered their position. The body dropped hard, weapon clattering across tile. Naomi's breathing hitched, but her hand stayed steady. Stairs, Min Jae whispered, pulling her toward the hallway that led to the second floor. Better defensive position, higher ground, more sight lines. They made it 3 steps before gunfire tore through the living room windows. Glass exploded inward. Min Jae shoved Naomi flat against the wall, covering her body with his while bullets chewed into drywall and furniture. The shooting stopped. Silence pressed down like something physical. Min Jae's heart hammered against his ribs. Naomi's fingers dug into his vest. He could feel her pulse racing where her throat pressed against his shoulder. How many? She breathed. At least 7 more inside, maybe another dozen outside. Min-jae shifted slightly, checking angles. Tae-yang's team should be cutting them down, but if they breach this deep... His phone buzzed. He checked it one-handed, weapon still aimed toward the shattered windows. Tae-yang. Multiple casualties, regrouping at east perimeter. They brought a small army. Min-jae typed back with his thumb. How long until reinforcements? Tae-yang. 20 minutes minimum. 20 minutes was a lifetime in a firefight. Movement flickered near the kitchen. Min-jae fired twice, suppressing. Someone returned fire from the opposite direction. Coordinated assault, multiple entry points, professional execution. These weren't street thugs. Dae-sung had sent trained killers. We need to move, Min-jae said against Naomi's ear. Safe room, now. This is not an argument. For once, she didn't fight him. They moved fast and low, Min-jae leading while tracking multiple threat vectors. The house had been designed with defensive positions in mind, but against this many hostiles, architecture only bought you time. They reached the master bedroom. Min-jae hit the biometric scanner. The hidden panel slid open, revealing the staircase down. In prod, he ordered. Naomi started down, then stopped. You're coming with me. I need to... No. She turned on the stairs, looking up at him with something fierce burning in her eyes. You don't get to play hero and die protecting me. Either we both survive this or we both don't. Those are the only options. Footsteps pounded up the main staircase. Min-jae made a calculation that violated every tactical instinct he possessed. He followed Naomi down into the safe room and sealed the door behind them. The staircase descended 15 feet into reinforced concrete. Emergency lighting activated automatically, casting everything in cold white illumination. The room itself was 20 by 20, lined with steel plating, stocked with weapons, communications equipment, and enough supplies to survive a siege. Min-jae immediately moved to the surveillance monitors mounted against one wall. Cameras throughout the house and grounds showed the full scope of the assault. 8 men inside the main house, searching room by room. Another 10 spread across the property, exchanging fire with Tae-yang's diminished security team. 2 vehicles parked near the front gate with engines running. Escape route or reinforcements waiting. Jesus, Naomi whispered, watching the screens. Min-jae was already pulling up encrypted communications. Tae-yang, status? The response came through scratchy with gunfire in the background. 3 of mine down. They're pushing hard toward the house. We can't hold them. Don't hold them. Fall back to secondary positions and wait for my signal. Sir, you're locked in? I know exactly where I am. Min-jae's voice went cold and absolutely certain. I need you to trust me and pull your team back, now. A pause. Then, understood. Naomi stood close enough that Min-jae could feel her body heat. What are you planning? This room has independent power, water, air filtration. We can survive down here for weeks if necessary. That's not what I asked. Min-jae turned to face her. The house is rigged with enough explosives to level everything inside the perimeter. Remote detonation. I built it as a final failsafe. Her eyes went wide. You're going to blow up your own house with them inside it. Yes. That's insane. That's survival. He moved to a control panel beside the weapons rack. Once Tae-yang pulls his team clear, I trigger the charges. Everyone inside dies. Your threat is neutralized. And if Tae-yang doesn't make it out in time? Min-jae's hand hesitated over the panel. He knows the protocols. He knows what this room means. Min-jae. Naomi grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. You're talking about murdering a dozen men. I'm talking about protecting you. By becoming a mass murderer? I've always been a mass murderer. His voice came out flat and emotionless. You just chose to ignore that part. The words landed like a slap. Naomi pulled back slightly, studying his face. Is that what you think? That I've been pretending you're something you're not? You work for a criminal organization. You coordinate my operations. You've known for 2 years exactly what I do. Min-jae gestured at the monitors showing armed men tearing through his house. This is the consequence. This is what loving me looks like. Blood and violence and hard choices that normal people never have to make. I'm not normal people. You should be. Well, I'm not. Naomi stepped closer, her voice going hard. I grew up watching my father work 3 jobs to keep us housed. Watched my mother die from cancer because we couldn't afford treatment. Learned exactly how the world works when you don't have money or power or protection. So don't you dare stand there and tell me I don't understand consequences. Min-jae stared at her. I chose you, Naomi continued, not because I'm naive or because I think you're secretly a good man underneath all the violence. I chose you because I see exactly who you are, the monster and the man. And I want both. So stop trying to protect me from reality and let me help you survive this. Before Min-jae could respond, the monitors flared white. Explosion. The whole room shook. Concrete dust rained down. Min-jae grabbed Naomi instinctively, pulling her against him while the structure groaned under sudden stress. When the shaking stopped, they both looked at the screens. One of the vehicles near the front gate was a burning wreck, bodies scattered across gravel. The surviving hostiles were retreating, dragging wounded, returning fire at positions they couldn't see. Min-jae's radio crackled. Sir, this is Tae-young. We just hit them with the outer perimeter charges, took out half their assault team. Min-jae exhaled slowly. Status on hostiles inside the house? Still searching. They don't know where you are yet. Keep them contained. Reinforcements? 12 minutes out. Min-jae looked at Naomi. We wait. She nodded once. They stood in the center of the safe room while violence played out on monitors around them. Min-jae tracked hostile movements, calculated angles, assessed tactical options. But part of his mind stayed fixed on the woman beside him, the way her breathing had steadied, the way she held her weapon with casual competence, the way she'd looked at him when she said, I chose you. You learned to shoot in Detroit, Min-jae said quietly. Naomi glanced at him. That's what you want to talk about right now? I want to know everything about you. We're in a bunker while people try to kill us. I'm aware. She almost smiled. My father taught me. He was a Marine, did 2 tours, came back different, my mother said. Harder. He never talked about what he'd seen, but he made sure I knew how to protect myself. Her voice went distant. He died when I was 16. Heart attack. Left us with nothing but medical debt. Min-jae felt something twist in his chest. I'm sorry. Don't be. He taught me everything I needed to survive. She looked at Min-jae directly, including how to recognize when someone's worth following into darkness. The monitors showed the hostile team regrouping inside the living room. 8 men clustered near the shattered windows, arguing in Korean that the surveillance system picked up and translated across the bottom of the screens. They're discussing whether to burn us out, Min-jae said, reading the translation. Can they? The safe room is fireproof, but if they torch the house, Tae-young's team will be exposed when they try to extract us. Naomi studied the screens. So we go up before they have the chance. We stay here until reinforcements arrive, and let them control the battlefield. She shook her head. You said you wanted me in your world. That means you don't get to lock me away the moment things get tactical. I'm trying to keep you alive. You're trying to protect me from participating. Naomi turned to face him fully. I understand the instinct, but if we're doing this, actually doing this, you need to trust me the same way I trust you. Min-jae opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Because she was right. He'd spent 2 years maintaining distance specifically to avoid this moment. Avoid caring about someone enough that losing them would destroy him. Avoid making the same mistake his father made. But Naomi wasn't his father's wife. She wasn't weak or naive or unprepared for his world. She'd survived 2 years inside a criminal organization by being smarter and more adaptable than anyone gave her credit for. And she was standing in his bunker, armed and steady, asking him to trust her with the most dangerous thing he'd ever felt. If we go up there, Min-jae said slowly, you follow my lead. No arguments, no heroics. You stay behind me and you do exactly what I say. Agreed. And if something happens to me, nothing's happening to you. Naomi. No. Her voice went fierce. We don't do the goodbye speech. We don't plan for you dying heroically while I survive. We go up there, we eliminate the threat, and we both walk out alive. Those are the only acceptable outcomes. Min-jae felt his mouth curve into something that might have been a smile under different circumstances. You're terrifying. I learned from the best. He kissed her then, hard and desperate and probably stupid given their tactical situation. But Naomi kissed him back just as fiercely, her fingers tangling in his hair, her body pressed against his like she could hold them both together through sheer will. When they broke apart, Min-jae rested his forehead against hers. "If we survive this," he said quietly, "I'm marrying you." Naomi laughed, actually laughed, in the middle of a firefight. "That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. I'm a criminal, not a romantic." "Lucky for you, I prefer survival over romance." She pulled back, checking her weapon. "Now, let's go kill some people so you can propose properly later." Min-jae armed himself with methodical efficiency. Extra magazines, backup weapon, combat knife. Then he moved to the door controls. "When this opens," he said, "we move fast. I'll take point. You cover rear positions. Trust your instincts." Naomi nodded. Min-jae opened the door. They emerged into the master bedroom to find it empty. Min-jae moved to the doorway, checking angles. The hallway stretched left toward guest rooms, right toward the main staircase. Voices drifted up from below. Korean, tense, arguing about search patterns. Min-jae gestured for Naomi to stay close. They moved down the hallway like shadows, Min-jae tracking multiple threat vectors, while his mind calculated firing solutions. Years of training took over. Breathing slowed, focus narrowed, the world reduced to angles, distances, and targets. They reached the top of the stairs. 3 men clustered in the living room below, backs turned, focused on something outside the windows. 2 more near the kitchen entrance. The rest spread through rooms Min-jae couldn't see from this angle. He caught Naomi's eye and held up 3 fingers, then pointed at the living room group. She understood immediately. Min-jae moved down the stairs with his weapon raised, Naomi covering their rear. They made it halfway before one of the men below turned and saw them. The man's eyes went wide, mouth opened to shout a warning. Min-jae fired. Then everything went to hell. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Min-jae dropped flat on the stairs, returning fire at targets moving through smoke and chaos. Beside him, Naomi engaged threats emerging from the kitchen, her shots controlled and accurate. A hostile broke cover, charging their position. Min-jae put him down. Another appeared from a side room. Naomi fired twice. The man dropped. "Moving left," Min-jae called, advancing down the last few stairs while sweeping for targets. He reached the living room just as 2 men tried to flank from opposite directions. Min-jae pivoted, firing right then left, dropping both in rapid succession. His slide locked back. Empty. He transitioned to his backup weapon smoothly, muscle memory taking over. Behind him, Naomi called out, "Contact rear!" Min-jae spun. A hostile had emerged from the hallway behind them, weapon raised, aiming directly at Naomi. Min-jae's world slowed to individual heartbeats, the man's finger tightening on the trigger. Naomi starting to turn, too slow, weapon not aligned. Min-jae moving without thought, pure instinct, putting himself between the threat and the woman he loved. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Something punched into Min-jae's left shoulder, spinning him partially around. Pain bloomed hot and sharp. His weapon clattered across the floor. But Naomi's hadn't. She fired 3 times, fast and precise. The hostile dropped backward, weapon falling from lifeless hands. Then she was beside Min-jae, hands on him, voice urgent. "Where are you hit?" "Shoulder." Min-jae's voice came out strained. "Not critical. Keep moving." "You're bleeding." "I said keep moving." He grabbed his fallen weapon with his right hand, checking the room. Bodies sprawled across expensive furniture. Smoke hung thick. Silence pressed down. "Clear," Naomi called from the kitchen. "Clear here," Min-jae confirmed. His radio crackled. "Sir, reinforcements are entering the property. We're sweeping for remaining hostiles." "Copy that. House is secure." Min-jae allowed himself one slow breath. Pain radiated from his shoulder in waves, warm blood soaking through his shirt. But they'd survived. Naomi was alive. Everything else was secondary. She appeared beside him, face tight with concern. "Let me see it." "It's fine." Min-jae, "I said it's fine." He caught her hand, squeezing gently. "I've been shot before. This is nothing." "You took a bullet for me." "Yes." "That was stupid." "Probably." "Don't do it again." Min-jae looked at this woman who'd just killed a man to protect him, standing in his destroyed house covered in plaster dust and gun smoke, and felt something absolute settle into place inside his chest. "I'll take every bullet meant for you," he said quietly. "That's not negotiable." Naomi's eyes went bright. You're an idiot. I'm your idiot. She kissed him then, careful of his injured shoulder, her hands framing his face. When she pulled back, Min-jae saw tears tracking through the dust on her cheeks. Don't cry, he said softly. I'm not crying. I'm furious with you for being heroic. Could have fooled me. Shut up and let me bandage your stupid heroic shoulder. Tae Yang appeared in the doorway. Tactical gear blood-splattered, expression grim. He took in the scene. Bodies scattered, Min-jae bleeding, Naomi pressed against him, and nodded once. Medical team is 30 seconds out, Tae Yang said. Casualties on our side? Min-jae asked. 3 dead, 4 wounded. Could have been worse. It's always worse. Min-jae looked at the destruction surrounding them. His private fortress, violated. His people, killed. The careful distance he'd maintained for years, shattered completely, all because he'd allowed himself to love someone. Tae Yang cleared his throat. Sir, we're sweeping the perimeter and securing the bodies, but we need to discuss next steps. Meaning? Daesung just declared war. This wasn't a targeted hit. This was a message. Min-jae felt cold fury settle into his bones. Then I'll send one back. You're injured. I'm functional. Get me a tactical assessment of Busan's operations in Seoul. Every business, every safe house, every location where Daesung might be hiding. I want targets by tonight. Naomi's hand tightened on his good arm. Min-jae, no. He turned to face her directly. They came into my home, killed my people, tried to kill you. There's no negotiation here, no compromise. Daesung just made the worst mistake of his life, and I'm going to make sure he knows it before he dies. And what happens after? Naomi's voice stayed calm, but her eyes burned with something intense. You eliminate Busan leadership, then another syndicate moves on your territory, then another. Violence begets violence until something breaks. That's how this world works. That's how it's always worked. Doesn't mean it has to. Min-jae stared at her. You're suggesting what exactly? I make peace with the man who just tried to murder you? I'm suggesting you remember why you built an empire in the first place. Naomi gestured at the destroyed house around them. Power, control, security. But if you're constantly fighting, you never actually have any of those things. You're just surviving until the next attack. Tae Yang shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we should continue this discussion after medical treatment. She has a point, Min-jae interrupted, still looking at Naomi. But executing it would require restructuring relationships with every major syndicate in Asia, years of work, constant negotiation. And it still might not prevent someone like Daesung from deciding I'm weak enough to challenge. Or, Naomi said quietly, it shows that the Black Tiger of Gangnam is smart enough to evolve past simple retaliation. That you're building something more permanent than a criminal empire held together by fear and violence. Min-jae felt his world shifting again. You're talking about legitimacy. I'm talking about survival. Real survival. Not just making it through tonight, but building something that lasts beyond the next territorial dispute. Medical personnel arrived, interrupting the conversation. They moved Min-jae to the kitchen, where they could work under better lighting. The bullet had passed through his shoulder cleanly, painful but not life-threatening. They cleaned the wound, applied bandages, gave him antibiotics and pain medication he immediately refused. Through it all, Naomi stayed beside him, her hand resting on his leg, her presence steady and grounding. When the medical team finished, Tae Yang returned with preliminary assessments. Daesung's inner circle is meeting tonight at a restaurant in Busan. Heavy security but accessible. We could hit them there. Min-jae started to respond. Naomi's phone buzzed. She frowned, checking it. Her expression went from confused to shocked to absolutely horrified in 3 seconds. What? Min-jae demanded. Naomi turned her phone toward him. A video message. Encrypted but clearly meant for her. The preview frame showed a woman bound to a chair, face bloody, terror in her eyes. Min-jae recognized her immediately. Naomi's younger sister. His blood went cold. Naomi's hand shook as she opened the video. Daesung's voice came through tinny but clear. Ms. Carter, you seem to have made a powerful enemy. Your sister, Jessica, correct? 24 years old, lives in Los Angeles, works as a nurse, is currently my guest. She'll remain alive and unharmed as long as you follow very specific instructions. The camera panned to show Jessica more clearly. Tears streaked her face, tape covered her mouth, but her eyes held the same fierce intelligence as Naomi's. You have 24 hours, Dae-sung continued. Come to Busan, alone, unarmed. Exchange yourself for your sister. If Kang Min-jae accompanies you, she dies. If you bring security, she dies. If you contact authorities, she dies. The address will be sent separately. Make your choice wisely. The video ended. Silence pressed down like something physical. Naomi stared at the blank screen. Her face had gone completely bloodless, hands trembling, breathing shallow and rapid. No, Min-jae said immediately. She's my sister. I don't care. You're not trading yourself. He has Jessica. And the moment you walk into that trap, he has both of you. Min-jae grabbed her shoulders gently, forcing her to look at him. This is a game. He's using your sister to control you. The second you give yourself up, he kills you both anyway. You don't know that. Yes, I do. I've played this game dozens of times. Hostages are leverage right up until they're not useful anymore. Then they're liability. Dae-sung won't let either of you walk away alive. Tears finally spilled down Naomi's cheeks. Then what do I do? She's 24. She's innocent. She has nothing to do with your world or mine. And now she's going to die because I fell in love with you. The words hit Min-jae like physical blows. We'll get her back, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. How? You just said, I said giving yourself up won't work. I didn't say we'd abandon her. Min-jae turned to Tae-young. How fast can we mobilize a tactical team for operations in Busan? Tae-young's expression was grim. For a hostage extraction? We'd need intelligence on the location, security assessment, multiple entry points. Best case scenario, 12 hours of prep work. We don't have 12 hours. Sir, rushing this gets people killed. Not rushing gets Naomi's sister killed. Min-jae's mind raced through scenarios, calculating odds, assessing risks. What assets do we have in Busan currently? 4 operatives, low level, surveillance mostly. Not enough. Min-jae pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts. I need to make a call. To who? Min-jae hesitated. What he was about to do would cost him leverage, respect, possibly future positioning with allied families. But he looked at Naomi, at the woman who'd chosen his darkness, who'd killed to protect him, who was breaking apart watching her sister's life hang by a thread, and knew there was no real choice. He dialed. The call connected after 3 rings. Kang Min-jae, a smooth voice answered. This is unexpected. Park Jun-young, Min-jae said carefully. I need your help. Silence stretched across the line. Park Jun-young controlled the Incheon territory through a combination of brutal efficiency and strategic alliances. He and Min-jae maintained professional neutrality. Not friends, not enemies, just 2 predators circling separate territory. Help is expensive, Jun-young said finally. Name your price. That depends on what you need. Min-jae explained the situation in brutal, efficient terms. Hostage, Busan, Dae-sung, time constraint. Another long silence. You're asking me to violate agreements with Busan leadership, Jun-young said slowly. That creates problems for my operations. I'm asking you to help extract an innocent civilian who got caught in syndicate politics. Nothing about this is innocent, Jun-young's voice went cold. But I'm curious what you're willing to trade for my assistance. Shipping routes, Min-jae said. Northern corridor, 20% of my traffic for the next 2 years. Naomi's eyes went wide. Tae-young looked shocked. 20% of Min-jae's northern shipping traffic represented roughly $800 million in revenue over 2 years. It was an insane offer. That's generous, Jun-young said carefully. Perhaps too generous. What aren't you telling me? The hostage is important to someone I care about. You don't care about people. That's what makes you effective. Maybe I've changed, Jun-young laughed, sharp and genuinely amused. The black tiger, domesticated by love. I never thought I'd see it. He paused. I'll help you. Not for the shipping routes, though I'll take those as well. I'll help because watching you compromise your principles for a woman is the most interesting thing to happen in our world in years, and I'm curious to see where it leads.
Junyoungshe?
I have resources in Busan. They'll contact you within 2 hours with intelligence on your hostage situation. After that, you're on your own for tactical execution. Is that acceptable? Yes. Then we have an agreement. Don't make me regret this, Min-jae. The line went dead. Min-jae lowered his phone slowly, looking at Naomi. We have 2 hours. She threw her arms around him, careful of his injured shoulder, her face pressed against his neck. He felt her tears soaking through his shirt, felt her body shaking with relief or fear or some combination of both. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Min-jae held her tightly. We still have to extract her alive. But we have a chance now. We have a chance. Taeyong cleared his throat. Sir, I should point out that even with Junyoung's intelligence, this is still an extremely high-risk operation. I'm aware. And you're injured. I'm functional. You're compromised, emotionally and physically. Min-jae pulled back from Naomi, meeting Taeyong's gaze. You're right, which is why I need you to run tactical. I'll provide oversight and authorization, but you handle execution. Taeyong nodded slowly. And Ms. Carter stays here, under heavy guard, non-negotiable. Like hell I'm staying here, Naomi said immediately. Your sister is leverage because Daesung knows I care about you. If you come to Busan, you become additional leverage. You stay here where you're safe. You just asked me to trust you. Now I'm asking you to trust me. This is different. No, it's not. Naomi's voice went hard. Jessica is my sister. I'm not sitting in a bunker while other people risk their lives to save her. I'm going to Busan. Naomi, you don't get to decide this. She stepped back, her expression absolutely certain. I love you, I trust you, but this is my sister, and I will be there when you extract her. You can work with that reality, or you can waste time arguing, but either way, I'm going to Busan. Min-jae stared at her, seeing his father's wife in Naomi's determined expression, seeing history about to repeat itself, seeing every reason he'd avoided emotional attachment preparing to destroy everything he'd built. But he also saw the woman who'd survived 2 years in his world, who'd killed to protect him, who stood in the wreckage of his fortress demanding to participate in her own life instead of being protected from it. She was right, and he was terrified. Fine, he said finally. You come to Busan, but you follow Taeyong's instructions exactly. No improvisation, no heroics. You do exactly what we tell you, or I will personally lock you in a vehicle until this is over. Naomi nodded. Agreed. Min-jae turned to Taeyong. Start prep work. Assume we're moving in 2 hours. I want multiple extraction scenarios, backup plans for when things go wrong, and enough firepower to level a city block if necessary. Yes, sir. As Taeyong left to coordinate, Min-jae pulled Naomi against him one more time. If something happens, he started. Nothing's happening. Naomi, no. She looked up at him fiercely. We don't do the goodbye speech. We extract Jessica. We eliminate Daesung. And we all survive. Those are the only outcomes I'm accepting. Min-jae kissed her forehead, breathing in the scent of her while his mind churned through tactical scenarios. In 2 hours, they drive into enemy territory to extract a hostage from one of Korea's most dangerous criminal organizations. In 2 hours, Min-jae would risk everything he'd built for a woman sister he'd never met. In 2 hours, the Black Tiger of Gangnam would discover whether love was the weakness that destroyed him or the strength that saved them all. And somewhere in Busan, Choi Dae-sung waited with a hostage, a trap, and absolutely no idea that he'd just made Kang Min-jae choose between his empire and the woman he loved. Daesung should have known better, because men like Min-jae didn't choose. They burned the whole world down and rebuilt it around the people they refused to lose. Park Jun-young's intelligence arrived 90 minutes later through encrypted channels that bypassed normal communication networks. Taeyong pulled up the files on a secured tablet, while Min-jae, Naomi, and 4 of his most trusted operatives gathered in what remained of the estate's command center. Hostage location confirmed, Taeyong said, expanding a satellite image across the screen. Warehouse District, Southern Busan. 3-story building registered to a shell corporation Daesung controls. Heavy security. At least 20 men on site, rotating shifts, military-grade surveillance. Min-jae studied the layout with cold precision. Multiple entry points, limited sight lines, too many corners where ambush could happen. This is a kill box. Yes, sir. Daesung wants me to walk in there. He wants Miss Carter to walk in there. Taeyang glanced at Naomi. You're the bait that draws the bigger prize. Naomi's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Min-jae traced potential approach vectors with one finger, his injured shoulder throbbing beneath fresh bandages. What about building access, schematics? Junyoung's people pulled archived construction permits. Building has a ground-level loading bay, main entrance, fire escape on the east side, and a rooftop access hatch. Which means Daesung has all 4 points covered. Probably. What about the hostage? Do we have confirmation she's actually inside? Taeyang pulled up thermal imaging. These were taken 40 minutes ago. 3rd floor, northwest corner. Single heat signature, minimal movement. Either restrained or sedated. Min-jae felt Naomi go rigid beside him. Her breathing changed, shallow, controlled, barely holding panic at bay. He reached over and took her hand, squeezing once. She squeezed back. Extraction scenarios, Min-jae said. Talk to me. Option 1. Frontal assault. We go in hard with maximum firepower, overwhelm security through superior force. High casualty probability on both sides, but direct. Rejected. Too much risk to the hostage and crossfire. Option 2. Stealth infiltration. Small team, night vision equipment, suppressed weapons. We extract the hostage before they know we're there. Which assumes their surveillance isn't as good as we think it is. Yes, sir. Min-jae rubbed his face with his good hand, exhaustion and pain medication making his thoughts feel sluggish. Every scenario ended with Naomi or her sister dead. Every tactical choice bought them inches instead of miles. What about option 3? Naomi asked quietly. Everyone looked at her. I go in, she continued. Exactly like Daesung demanded. Alone, unarmed, trading myself for Jessica, except I'm wearing a tracker and a concealed mic. You position your team around the perimeter. The moment Jessica is clear, you extract me. Absolutely not, Min-jae said immediately. It's the only scenario where Jessica definitely survives. And you definitely die. Not if your team moves fast enough. Min-jae turned to face her fully. You think Daesung is going to let you walk out? The moment you're inside, you become leverage against me. He'll use you to force concessions, territory, maybe my complete surrender. And when I refuse, he'll start sending me pieces of you until I comply. Naomi flinched but held his gaze. So don't refuse. Silence dropped like a physical weight. Excuse me? Min-jae's voice went dangerously quiet. Give him what he wants. Territory, routes, whatever it takes to buy time for your team to get us both out. You're asking me to surrender everything I've built. I'm asking you to choose. Naomi's voice stayed steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes. Your empire or my sister? Because we both know there's no tactical solution where both survive unless you're willing to sacrifice something. Min-jae stared at her, feeling his world narrow to this single impossible choice. She was right. Tactically, strategically, in every way that mattered, she was right. And he hated it. There has to be another way, he said, but it sounded weak even to his own ears. There isn't. Naomi stepped closer, her hand coming up to touch his face gently. I know what I'm asking. I know what it costs, but Min-jae, she's 24, she's innocent. And if she dies because I fell in love with you, I'll never forgive myself. I'll never forgive us. Taeyang cleared his throat. Sir, if I may. No, Min-jae cut him off. Everyone out. I need to think. The operatives filed out silently. Taeyang hesitated at the door, then nodded once and left. Min-jae and Naomi stood alone in the destroyed command center. You can't ask me to do this, Min-jae said quietly. I'm not asking. I'm telling you what's going to happen. Naomi's voice was calm, absolute, terrifying in its certainty. I'm walking into that warehouse, with or without your support. You can either help me survive it, or you can watch me die trying to save my sister alone. You think I'm going to let you? You can't stop me. She pulled away from him, and the loss of contact felt like something breaking. I love you. I've chosen your darkness. But Jessica is innocent, and I won't let her pay for my choices. So either we figure out how to do this together, or I do it alone. Min-jae felt something crack inside his chest. This was the cost. This was what loving someone actually meant. Not just accepting their presence in your life, but accepting that they had will and agency and would make choices that destroyed you. His father's mistake hadn't been loving his mother. It had been thinking love meant control. "All right," Min-jae said finally, "we do it your way, but with modifications." Naomi's eyes widened slightly. "What modifications?" "You wear more than a tracker. Full tactical vest under your clothes, concealed weapon, comm unit. And I'm positioning snipers on every roof within 300 yards. The moment I have clear shots on Daesung's security, I'm taking them." That could get Jessica killed. So could walking in there blind. Min-jae pulled her against him, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. "You want to trade yourself for your sister? Fine. But you're going in armored, armed, and with an entire tactical team ready to burn that warehouse down if things go wrong." Naomi nodded against his chest. "Okay. And Naomi?" "Yeah? If Daesung hurts you, I'm going to kill him slowly enough that he begs for death long before it comes." She looked up at him and something fierce burned in her eyes. "Promise?" "Promise." They prepped for 2 hours. Taeyong outfitted Naomi with a lightweight tactical vest concealed beneath a bulky jacket, placed a subcompact pistol in a holster at the small of her back, fitted her with a nearly invisible comm unit that transmitted everything she heard back to the team. Min-jae watched the whole process, feeling like he was preparing someone he loved for execution. At midnight, they loaded into 3 unmarked vehicles and drove south toward Busan. The journey took 90 minutes through dark highways and industrial districts that looked increasingly desolate. Min-jae sat beside Naomi in the lead vehicle, neither of them speaking, their hands clasped together like that physical connection could hold off what was coming. They reached the warehouse district at 1:30 in the morning. Taeyong positioned teams on 3 surrounding rooftops with clear sightlines to the target building. 2 more operatives set up mobile surveillance stations in nearby alleyways. Min-jae established a command position in an empty office building 200 yards away, close enough to respond but far enough to avoid immediate detection. At 2 a.m., Naomi stood at the edge of their perimeter, ready to walk into enemy territory. Min-jae checked her vest one last time. Her weapon, her comm unit. Everything looked right, but nothing felt right. "Remember," he said quietly, "you go in. You confirm Jessica is alive. You facilitate the exchange. The moment you're both clear of the building, you hit the ground and we extract you both." Naomi nodded. "What if Daesung doesn't let us leave together?" "Then you signal me and I burn the whole place down with everyone inside except you and your sister." "That's not really a plan." "It's the only plan I have." Min-jae cupped her face with both hands. "Don't be brave in there. Don't try to negotiate. Just survive until I can get you out." "I love you," Naomi whispered. "I love you too, which is why this is the stupidest thing I've ever agreed to." She kissed him once, hard and desperate. Then she pulled away and started walking toward the warehouse. Min-jae watched her go, feeling something cold and terrible settle into his bones. This was wrong. Every instinct he possessed screamed that this was wrong, but he'd made his choice, and now he had to trust the choice wouldn't destroy them both. Naomi reached the main entrance. 2 guards in tactical gear stopped her. Words were exchanged that Min-jae couldn't hear from this distance, but the comm unit in Naomi's ear transmitted everything back to his position. "I'm here for the exchange," Naomi said, her voice steady. "Naomi Carter for Jessica Carter." That was the deal. One guard spoke into a radio, waited, then nodded and gestured for Naomi to enter. She disappeared inside the building. Min-jae's radio crackled. "All units, target is inside the structure. Maintain positions and await further orders." Through Naomi's comm unit, Min-jae heard footsteps echoing in what sounded like a large empty space. Voices in Korean discussing security protocols. Then a new voice, smooth, cultured, and absolutely cold. "Miss Carter, how kind of you to accept my invitation." Choi Dae-sung. "Where is my sister?" Naomi demanded. "Upstairs, safe, unharmed, for now." Dae-sung's footsteps moved closer. "Tell me something, Ms. Carter. What does it feel like to be the weakness that destroys the Black Tiger? What does it feel like to be so pathetic you have to kidnap innocent women to threaten your enemies?" Dae-sung laughed. "I like you. Spirit, Intelligence. I understand why Min Jae risks everything for you. A pause. Unfortunately, that makes you far too valuable to simply release. Min Jae's blood went cold. Through the comm unit, he heard Naomi's breathing change. Faster, shallower, fear starting to break through her control. We had a deal, she said. We had negotiations. Negotiations change. Dae-sung's voice hardened. Here is the new arrangement. You and your sister remain my guests. Kang Min-jae transfers 60% of his sole operations to my control. He publicly acknowledges Busan supremacy over his territory, and he does all of this within 72 hours, or I start returning pieces of you to him. Min-jae was moving before he'd consciously made the decision. Tae-yang caught his arm. Sir, if you go in there, then I go in there. Min-jae shook him off. Prepare for full tactical assault. 2 minutes. Sir, that's an order. Min-jae grabbed his weapon and tactical vest, his injured shoulder screaming in protest. Through Naomi's comm, he heard her voice stay steady despite the terror underneath. Min-jae won't agree to those terms, she said. Then you'll die. Slowly, painfully, and he'll listen to every moment through whatever surveillance device you're undoubtedly wearing. Dae-sung moved closer. Or perhaps we should check you for weapons right now. Sound of fabric rustling, Naomi gasping. Someone had grabbed her. Min-jae started running. He covered the 200 yards to the warehouse in under 40 seconds, his team scrambling to keep up. Reached the main entrance where the 2 guards spun toward him, weapons raising. Min-jae shot them both without breaking stride. He hit the door hard, weapon raised, scanning for targets. The interior was a vast open space lit by harsh industrial lighting, shipping containers stacked against walls, support columns creating cover positions. And in the center, Choi Dae-sung stood with his hand wrapped in Naomi's hair, a gun pressed against her temple. 20 of Dae-sung's men surrounded them, weapons trained on the entrance. On Min-jae. Kang Min-jae, Dae-sung said pleasantly. Right on time. Tell me, did you really think I wouldn't anticipate this response? Min-jae's weapon stayed trained on Dae-sung's head. Behind him, Tae-yang and 4 operatives spread into tactical positions. But they were outnumbered 4-1, and Dae-sung had Naomi. Let her go, Min-jae said quietly. So you can kill me? I don't think so. Then we have a stalemate. No. I have leverage. You have desperation. Dae-sung pressed the gun harder against Naomi's head, making her wince. Drop your weapons. All of you, or I put a bullet through her beautiful brain. Min-jae didn't move. His mind raced through scenarios, angles, probabilities. Every calculation ended the same way. Naomi dead if he pulled the trigger, Naomi dead if he surrendered. No winning moves, only choices about how they lost. Tick-tock, Dae-sung said. My patience has limits. Min-jae met Naomi's eyes across the warehouse. Saw fear there, but also trust. She believed he would save her. He wasn't sure he could. Slowly, Min-jae lowered his weapon, set it on the concrete floor, straightened with his hands visible. Behind him, his team did the same. Dae-sung smiled. Wise choice. Now, about those terms. A gunshot exploded through the warehouse. Dae-sung's head snapped back, blood sprayed. His grip on Naomi released as he collapsed. Everyone froze. Then chaos erupted. Dae-sung's men opened fire. Min-jae dove for his weapon while Naomi dropped flat. Tae-yang and his team returned fire from behind support columns. Bullets tore through metal and concrete. Muzzle flashes strobed through the darkness. Min-jae combat crawled toward Naomi, grabbing her vest and pulling her toward cover. She moved with him, both of them scrambling behind a shipping container while gunfire raged around them. You okay? Min-jae gasped. Who the hell shot Dae-sung? Naomi's voice shook. I don't know. More gunfire, shouting in Korean. Min-jae risked a glance around the container and saw Dae-sung's men falling back toward the rear exits, clearly unprepared for whoever had just eliminated their boss. Then Min-jae saw him. Park Jun-young stood near the western entrance, surrounded by a dozen of his own men, weapons still raised from the shot that killed Dae-sung. Their eyes met across the warehouse. Jun-young smiled, and Min-jae understood. This had never been about helping, never been about intelligence or tactical support. Jun-young had orchestrated this entire situation, fed Min-jae information, knowing exactly how it would play out, positioned himself to eliminate Dae-sung, and was now poised to claim Busan territory in the resulting power vacuum. Min-jae had been played. Perfectly, completely played. Junyoung's voice carried across the warehouse. Kang Min-jae, I believe our business arrangement just became significantly more complicated. You set this up, Min-jae said, his voice deadly quiet. I created an opportunity. You chose to walk into it. Junyoung gestured at his men, who began advancing into the warehouse, weapons raised. Now we negotiate new terms. Terms for what? Your survival. Miss Carter's survival, and the sister you came here to rescue. Junyoung nodded toward the stairs leading to the upper levels. She's still up there, by the way. Unguarded now that Dae-sung's men are fleeing. You could try to extract her, or you could listen to my very reasonable proposal. Min-jae felt trapped between impossible choices. Behind him, Tae-yang and his small team were outgunned and exhausted. In front of him, Junyoung controlled the entire space. And somewhere upstairs, Naomi's sister waited, alive or dead, he didn't know. What do you want? Min-jae asked. Everything you were prepared to give Dae-sung. 60% of your sole operations. Public acknowledgement of my supremacy. And a partnership that ensures you never threaten my interests again. And if I refuse? Junyoung's smile widened. Then I leave. Right now. With my men. And you're left in a warehouse full of witnesses surrounded by Busan reinforcements who will arrive in approximately 4 minutes, blamed for murdering Choi Dae-sung. Your empire collapses. You're arrested or killed. Miss Carter and her sister become collateral damage. Naomi's hand found Min-jae's, her fingers squeezed tight. You can't do this, Min-jae said, but his voice lacked conviction. I already have. Junyoung checked his watch. 3 minutes now. Decide quickly. Min-jae looked at Naomi, saw his own defeat reflected in her eyes. Everything he'd built, every strategic move, every carefully maintained alliance, all of it crashing down because he'd allowed himself to love someone. His father had been right. Sentiment was weakness, and weakness got you destroyed. Min-jae, Naomi whispered, my sister, I know. You have to… I know. Min-jae stood slowly, hands visible, weapon lowered. Looked at Park Junyoung across the warehouse and felt something fundamental break inside himself. I accept your terms, he said. All of them. Junyoung nodded, satisfied. Wise choice. Now I suggest you retrieve Ms. Carter's sister quickly. Busan reinforcements will be here soon, and I'd prefer not to engage in prolonged firefights. Min-jae turned to Tae-yang. Get Naomi out. Back to the vehicles. I'll get Jessica. Sir, that's an order. Min-jae moved toward the stairs, his injured shoulder throbbing, his mind numb with defeat. He climbed to the 3rd floor, weapon raised, clearing corners automatically while his thoughts churned. He'd lost everything: soul operations, territory, respect, power. All for a woman and her sister. He found Jessica in the northwest corner room, exactly where the thermal imaging had indicated. She was bound to a chair, tape over her mouth, eyes wide with terror, but alive. Min-jae cut her bonds quickly. I'm with your sister. You're safe now. Jessica sobbed through the tape. Min-jae removed it gently. Where's Naomi? Jessica gasped. Downstairs. We're getting you both out. He helped her stand, supporting her weight as they moved back toward the stairs. His comm unit crackled with Tae-yang's voice. Sir, Busan reinforcements approaching from the north. We need to move now. Min-jae got Jessica downstairs and out the rear exit, where Tae-yang's team had positioned their vehicles. Naomi rushed forward, grabbing her sister, both women crying and holding each other. Junyoung watched from nearby, his men providing perimeter security. A touching reunion, he said. Now I suggest you all leave before this becomes exponentially more complicated. Min-jae stared at him, memorizing every detail of this betrayal. This isn't over. Yes, it is. You just haven't accepted it yet. Junyoung moved closer, lowering his voice. You made yourself vulnerable, Min-jae. You fell in love. In our world, that's suicide. I simply capitalized on your weakness. I'll remember that. I'm counting on it. Junyoung smiled. Now go. Take your women. Rebuild what's left of your empire. And remember that you're alive right now because I allow it." Min-jae turned away. His jaw clenched so tight, his teeth ached. He guided Naomi and Jessica to the lead vehicle, got them inside, and climbed in beside them. As they drove away from the warehouse, sirens wailing in the distance, Min-jae stared out the window at Seoul's lights and felt something cold settle permanently inside his chest. He'd saved Naomi and her sister, but he'd lost himself completely in the process. The Black Tiger of Gangnam, the man who never compromised, never surrendered, never allowed emotion to destroy his empire, was gone. And Min-jae had no idea who he was supposed to be now. Naomi's hand found his in the darkness. "We're alive," she whispered. "We made it." Min-jae squeezed her hand but said nothing, because they hadn't made it. They'd survived. And sometimes survival was so much worse than dying. The vehicle drove through empty streets while Min-jae calculated exactly how much he'd lost tonight. Seoul operations, 800 million annually, territory spanning 3 districts, political connections that took years to cultivate, respect from families across Asia who would now see him as weak, compromised, beaten, all of it gone. For love. Beside him, Naomi and Jessica whispered to each other, voices thick with relief and trauma. He'd saved them both. That should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the beginning of a war he'd already lost. Min-jae's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. "Kang Min-jae," a voice said in Korean, deep, unfamiliar, dangerous. "My name is Kwon Jin-ho. You don't know me, but I've been watching you for a very long time. What do you want?" "I want to offer you something very few people in our world ever receive, a second chance." Kwon's voice carried amusement. "Park Jun-young believes he's won. He thinks your empire is finished. But what if I told you there's a way to take everything back? Everything you lost tonight. Everything Jun-young stole. And more." Min-jae's grip tightened on his phone. "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Meet me tomorrow night, alone. I'll send you the location." Kwon paused. "And Min-jae? Bring that fighting spirit. Because what I'm offering you requires the kind of ruthlessness you displayed before you let love make you soft." The line went dead. Min-jae stared at his phone while his world reorganized itself around this new peace. Park Jun-young thought this was over. He was wrong. Because the Black Tiger hadn't been destroyed tonight. He'd just been reminded what happened when you tried to build something civilized on foundations of blood and violence. And now Min-jae understood exactly what he needed to do. He needed to burn it all down and start over. But this time, he wouldn't make the mistake of holding anything back. This time, he would become the monster everyone feared he always was. The question was whether Naomi would still love him when she saw what he was truly capable of becoming. They returned to Seoul just before dawn, the city still dark except for scattered lights from early morning traffic. Min-jae had Jessica and Naomi taken to a secure apartment in Gangnam, one of several safe houses he maintained under corporate aliases. Tae-young positioned a rotating security detail outside. No one in or out without authorization. Min-jae himself went directly to his penthouse office. The same office where this had all started, where he'd first noticed Naomi, where he'd built an empire on calculated violence and emotional distance, where he'd been stupid enough to think he could have both power and love. He poured whiskey, stared at Seoul through floor-to-ceiling windows while his injured shoulder throbbed beneath bandages. His phone sat on the desk, Kwon Jin-ho's message burning in his mind like an open wound. A second chance. Everything he'd lost returned, but at what cost? The door opened behind him. Min-jae didn't turn. "You should be with your sister," he said quietly. Naomi's footsteps crossed the office. She appeared beside him, her reflection visible in the glass, still wearing the tactical vest under her jacket, still looking like someone who'd survived a war. "Jessica's sleeping, sedated. The doctor said she'll be okay physically." Naomi's voice was hoarse. "Emotionally is a different question." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. You saved her life." "I also put it in danger in the first place." Min-jae finally turned to look at her. "Park Jun-young was right. I made myself vulnerable, made you vulnerable. And it cost me everything." Naomi studied his face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe this was a mistake. The words hung between them like broken glass. Naomi went very still. You mean us? I mean all of it. Min-jae gestured at the city beyond the windows. I built something that worked, an empire no one could touch. And then I let myself feel something, and it destroyed everything in one night. You're alive. I'm alive. Jessica's alive. And Park Jun-young controls 60% of my operations. Families across Asia think I'm weak. Every enemy I've ever made is circling, waiting to see if the Black Tiger is actually finished. Min-jae's voice went cold. That's not survival. That's slow death. Naomi stepped closer. So what are you planning to do? Min-jae didn't answer immediately. He thought about Kwon Jin-ho's call, the promise of restoration, the implication that getting everything back would require becoming something worse than he'd been before. I received a call, he said finally. Someone offering to help me take back what I lost. Who? I don't know yet, but I'm meeting him tomorrow night. Naomi's expression shifted, concern bleeding into something that looked like fear. Min-jae, this sounds like another trap. Probably. Then why? Because I can't live like this. The words came out harsher than he'd intended. I can't be the man who surrendered his empire for love. I can't be weak. Not in this world. Weakness gets you killed, or worse. It gets you turned into someone else's puppet. Is that what you think happened? That loving me made you weak? Loving you made me vulnerable. There's a difference. Naomi flinched like he'd struck her. So what, you're just going to pretend the last 2 years didn't happen? Pretend Monaco didn't happen? Pretend you didn't take a bullet for me yesterday? I'm going to do whatever it takes to survive. Min-jae met her eyes directly. Even if that means becoming someone you can't love anymore. Tears gathered in Naomi's eyes, but her voice stayed steady. You don't get to make that choice for me. I'm not making it for you. I'm making it for both of us. Min-jae turned back to the window. Go be with your sister. Take whatever time you need. When this is over, we'll figure out what happens next. And if I don't want to wait, if I want to be part of whatever you're planning, then you're a fool. Min-jae's reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, cold, closed off, already becoming the monster he'd promised to be. Because what I'm about to do isn't going to be pretty. It's going to be brutal and bloody and absolutely necessary. And I don't need you watching me become the thing you fell in love with me despite being. Silence stretched between them. Then Naomi walked out without another word. The door closed behind her with a sound like something ending. Min-jae stood alone in his office, drinking whiskey that tasted like ash, and told himself this was the right choice. The only choice. Love was the weakness that destroyed empires, and he was done being weak. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of strategic planning. Min-jae met with what remained of his inner circle, men who'd survived the assault on his estate, who still believed the Black Tiger could rise from this defeat. Jun-young thinks he's won, Min-jae told them. He thinks I'll accept his terms and rebuild slowly under his control. He's wrong. Tae-young, his left arm in a sling from the warehouse firefight, leaned forward. What are you planning, sir? War. Complete. Total. No survivors. The room went silent. Sir, one of his lieutenants said carefully, we lost 60% of our sole operations. Our financial position is severely compromised. Starting a war right now, so is exactly what no one expects. Min-jae's voice cut through the room like a blade. Jun-young thinks I'm beaten. So does every other family watching this situation. They're waiting for me to consolidate what's left and accept my new position in the hierarchy. And you're going to attack instead, Tae-young said slowly. I'm going to burn Jun-young's empire to the ground, take back everything he stole, and make sure every family in Asia remembers why they feared me in the first place. That will require resources we don't currently have. Which is why I'm meeting someone tonight who claims he can provide them. Tae-young's expression darkened. Sir, we don't know who this Kwon Jin-ho is. He could be another trap, I know. Min-jae stood, signaling the meeting was over. But I'm out of good options, so I'm taking the dangerous one. That night, Min-jae drove alone to the location Kwon Jin-ho had sent via encrypted message, an abandoned industrial complex north of the city, far from surveillance and witnesses. The kind of place where bodies disappeared and no one asked questions. Min-jae went anyway. He arrived at midnight, parked his vehicle near the main building, stepped out with his weapon concealed but ready. A single figure waited in the center of the empty lot, illuminated by harsh security lighting. Kwon Jin-ho was older than Min-jae expected, mid-50s maybe. Silver hair, expensive suit, face scarred in ways that spoke of violence survived rather than inflicted. He stood with the casual confidence of someone who'd seen everything and feared nothing. "Kang Min-jae," Kwon said as Min-jae approached. "Thank you for coming. You said you could help me. I'm listening. Direct. I appreciate that." Kwon gestured at the empty complex surrounding them. "I own this property. Bought it 6 months ago through shell corporations. Do you know why?" "I don't care," Kwon smiled. "Because I've been preparing for this moment. For you. For what comes next." Min-jae's hand moved closer to his concealed weapon. "You're not making sense. Park Jun-young isn't your real enemy." Kwon's voice went hard. "He's a symptom of a larger problem. The old families, the traditional syndicates who built their power on territory and violence, they're dying. Too slow to adapt, too rigid to survive what's coming. And what's coming? Evolution." Kwon stepped closer. "The future of organized crime isn't territory. It's technology, cryptocurrency, cyber warfare, and international networks that operate beyond borders. The families clinging to old models will be extinct within 5 years." "That's a fascinating lecture. What does it have to do with me? You're young, smart, ruthless enough to do what's necessary. And right now you're vulnerable enough to be remade into something greater." Kwon's eyes glinted in the harsh lighting. "I'm offering you a partnership. My resources, my connections, my vision, combined with your reputation and operational experience. Together, we don't just take back what you lost. We build something that makes the old empires look like children playing in sandboxes." Min-jae studied him carefully. "What's the catch?" "You accept my leadership, my strategy, my timeline." Kwon's voice went cold. "I don't partner with equals. I create assets, weapons, tools that serve my vision. If you agree to this, you become mine, completely." "That sounds like slavery. That sounds like survival." Kwon moved even closer, close enough that Min-jae could see old knife scars across his throat. "Park Jun-young humiliated you, stole from you, used your weakness against you. Under my guidance, you eliminate him, reclaim your territory, and expand beyond anything you've imagined, or you refuse my offer and die slowly while every enemy circles your corpse." Min-jae felt ice settle into his veins. This was the choice, the real one. Not between love and power, between becoming someone else's weapon or dying as himself. "What do you want me to do?" Min-jae asked quietly. Kwon smiled. "Tomorrow night, Park Jun-young is hosting a celebration at his private estate, celebrating his victory over you, his acquisition of your territory. Every major family will attend. Security will be heavy, but manageable. You want me to attack during the celebration. I want you to walk in there as a guest. Bring your woman if you want. Naomi Carter, correct? Show everyone you're not beaten, not finished, just regrouping." Kwon's voice dropped lower. "And then, at precisely 11 p.m., you're going to execute Park Jun-young in front of everyone." Min-jae's heart rate spiked. "That's suicide. That's theater." Kwon pulled out a phone showing Min-jae detailed schematics. "I'll have 30 operatives positioned throughout the estate. The moment you pull the trigger, they eliminate Jun-young's security. My people secure all exits, and you walk out alive while I consolidate his entire empire under our partnership." "You're insane." "I'm strategic." Kwon put the phone away. "Jun-young dies publicly. Every family sees that the Black Tiger isn't domesticated. Your reputation is restored instantly, and under my guidance, you become more powerful than you've ever been." Min-jae stared at this stranger, offering him everything he'd lost and more. Every instinct screamed this was wrong, that accepting would mean surrendering his identity, becoming someone else's puppet. But what was his alternative? Slowly rebuild over years while everyone remembered his defeat? Watch Naomi and her sister remain vulnerable to every enemy who decided they were his weakness? Die slowly or transform immediately? Those were his options. "If I agree," Min-jae said carefully, "what guarantees do I have that you won't just eliminate me after Jun-young is dead?" "None." Kwon's honesty was brutal. You're taking a risk, but so am I. I'm betting you're valuable enough to rebuild into something greater. You're betting I'm powerful enough to deliver what I've promised. We're both gambling with our lives. That's how empires are born. Min Jae thought about Naomi, about the woman who'd chosen his darkness, about whether she'd still love him after he did this. Then he stopped thinking about her entirely, because this wasn't about love anymore. This was about survival. I'm in, Min Jae said. Kwan's smile widened. Excellent. I'll send you the detailed operational plan by noon tomorrow. Memorize it. Bring minimal security. We don't want to alert Junyoung. And Min Jae? Yeah? Once you pull that trigger, there's no going back. You'll be mine completely. Every decision, every operation, every breath you take will serve my vision. Are you prepared for that? Min Jae met his eyes. I'm prepared to do whatever it takes. Then welcome to the future. Min Jae drove back to Seoul feeling something cold and absolute settle into his bones. He just agreed to become someone's weapon, someone's tool. But tools stayed sharp. Tools survived. And right now, survival was the only thing that mattered. He returned to his penthouse at 3 a.m. to find Naomi waiting in his office. She sat in the chair across from his desk, still awake, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Couldn't sleep? Min Jae asked, pouring himself whiskey. Where were you? Meeting someone. The person who called, the one offering to help you. Yes. Naomi stood slowly. And what did they offer? Min Jae drank, letting the burn ground him. Everything I lost, and more. In exchange for what? Myself. The words hung between them. Naomi crossed the office until she stood directly in front of him. What are you planning to do? Min Jae met her eyes. Tomorrow night, I'm going to kill Park Junyoung in front of every major family and organized crime. I'm going to reclaim my empire, and I'm going to become something I swore I'd never be. Which is? Someone else's weapon. Naomi's face went pale. Min Jae, don't. He cut her off. Don't try to talk me out of this. Don't try to save me from myself. This is the choice I'm making. The only choice that lets me survive what happened in Busan. You're talking about murder, premeditated, public. You'll start a war. I'll end one. Min Jae set his glass down. Junyoung humiliated me, made me weak, used you against me. He doesn't get to walk away from that. And what about us? What happens to us after you do this? Min Jae felt something break inside his chest. I don't know. Tears gathered in Naomi's eyes. You're choosing revenge over everything we built. I'm choosing survival over the illusion that we could have a normal life. Min Jae's voice went hard. You wanted to be part of my world? This is my world. Blood and violence and hard choices that destroy the people who make them. I told you in Monaco I was a monster. You chose to ignore that part. I didn't ignore it. I accepted it. Then accept this. Naomi stared at him for a long moment. Then she stepped back, her expression shifting into something Min Jae had never seen before. Not anger, not fear, but something colder and infinitely more dangerous. Fine, she said quietly. Do what you need to do. Become whoever you need to become. But understand something, Min Jae. If you walk into that estate tomorrow night planning to murder someone in cold blood while serving another man's agenda, you're not the person I fell in love with. You're not the Black Tiger. You're just another tool being used by someone smarter than you. The words hit like physical blows. Get out, Min Jae said. Gladly. Naomi walked toward the door, stopped with her hand on the handle, turned back. I love you, she said. I love the man who took a bullet for me, who saved my sister, who chose me over his empire even when it destroyed him. That man is worth saving. But this man? She gestured at him coldly. This man is exactly what Kwon Jin-ho wants, desperate enough to be controlled. If you go through with this, you'll lose more than your empire. You'll lose yourself completely. Then she left. Min Jae stood alone in his office, breathing hard, his hands shaking with rage or fear or something he couldn't name. She was wrong. She had to be wrong. Because if she wasn't, he'd just agreed to destroy himself for nothing. The next day passed in brutal preparation. Tae-young received the operational plan from Kwon's people, reviewed it with Min Jae in silence. Neither of them spoke about how insane this was, how many ways it could fail, how many people would die. At 7 p.m., Min-jae, dressed in a charcoal suit, holstered his weapon, checked his appearance in the mirror, and barely recognized himself. The man staring back looked cold, empty, already dead inside. Perfect. Tae-young drove them to Junyoung's estate in Pyeongchang-dong, one of Seoul's wealthiest districts, where politicians and criminals lived side by side pretending they were different. The estate sprawled across 3 acres, hidden behind high walls and electronic gates. Security checked their vehicle at the entrance, patted them down, found Min-jae's weapon immediately. "Guests aren't permitted weapons inside," the guard said. Min-jae smiled coldly. "Then I guess I'm not coming in." The guard spoke into his radio, waited, then nodded reluctantly and returned Min-jae's weapon. "Mr. Park says you may keep it, as a courtesy." Because Junyoung wanted him armed, wanted the threat present, wanted everyone to see that the Black Tiger was neutered enough to walk into his enemy's home carrying a weapon he'd never dare use. The guard was wrong about that last part. They drove through the gates into a circular driveway filled with expensive vehicles, stepped out into warm evening air heavy with jasmine. Music drifted from inside the main house, string quartet, champagne glasses clinking, voices murmuring in multiple languages. This was power, real power, the kind built over generations, protected by connections, reinforced by tradition, the kind Min-jae was about to destroy in one violent moment. Tae-young stayed close as they entered. The house opened into a massive ballroom filled with the most dangerous people in Asia: Russian mob bosses, Yakuza leadership, triad representatives, Korean syndicate heads, all of them celebrating Park Junyoung's victory over Kang Min-jae. Conversations died as Min-jae entered. Every eye turned toward him. Min-jae smiled like he owned the room and walked deeper into enemy territory. Park Junyoung stood near the center of the ballroom, surrounded by admirers, glass of champagne in hand. He saw Min-jae and his smile widened with genuine delight. "Kang Min-jae," Junyoung called out. "I'm so pleased you accepted my invitation. Come, join us. We're celebrating new beginnings." Min-jae crossed the ballroom with measured steps. Every instinct screamed at him to pull his weapon now, end this before it began. But Kwan's plan required theater, required timing, required waiting until 11 p.m. when 30 operatives would be in position. It was currently 8:45, more than 2 hours to survive surrounded by enemies while pretending to be civilized. "Congratulations," Min-jae said, accepting a champagne glass from a passing waiter. "You played me perfectly." "Business," Junyoung's voice carried false modesty. "Nothing personal." "Everything's personal in our world." "Then perhaps you've learned an important lesson about keeping business and sentiment separate." Junyoung gestured around the ballroom. "Everyone here understands that. It's how we survive." Min-jae sipped champagne that tasted like poison and smiled like his heart wasn't screaming murder. "I'm learning every day." The next 2 hours stretched into eternity. Min-jae circulated through the ballroom, making polite conversation with people who'd once respected him and now saw him as a cautionary tale. He smiled, laughed at appropriate moments, pretended everything was fine while counting down minutes until violence. At 10:30, his phone buzzed. "Kwan, operatives in position, proceed as planned." Min-jae's heart rate spiked. 30 minutes. That was all the time left before he became a murderer serving someone else's agenda. Before he proved Naomi right about everything, he found himself thinking about her, about Monaco, about the moment she'd looked at him and said she wasn't afraid of who he was. Would she be afraid of who he was about to become? At 10:45, Junyoung called for everyone's attention. The string quartet fell silent. Conversations died. Every dangerous person in the ballroom turned toward their host. "Friends," Junyoung said, his voice carrying through the space. "Thank you for joining me tonight. We're gathered here to celebrate not just my success, but the evolution of our world. The old ways are dying. Territory-based power, violence as negotiation. These things are relics of a past that no longer serves us." Min-jae's hand drifted toward his concealed weapon. "The future," Junyoung continued, "belongs to those smart enough to adapt, to form alliances, to understand that cooperation generates more wealth than conflict. And tonight, I want to announce the formation of a new alliance that will reshape organized crime across Asia." He gestured toward the ballroom entrance. A figure appeared. Kwon Jin-ho, walking into the ballroom like he owned it, smiling at Min-jae with something that looked like triumph, and Min-jae understood. He'd been played again. Perfectly. Completely. Irrevocably. Kwon wasn't offering to help Min-jae destroy Jun-young. Kwon was partnering with Jun-young, had been all along. The entire plan, the operatives, the timing, the theatrical murder, it was never about restoring Min-jae's empire. It was about making him commit an act so violent, so public, so unforgivable that every family would turn against him, making him the scapegoat for whatever Kwon and Jun-young were building together. Min-jae's vision tunneled. His hand closed around his weapon. Every muscle in his body screamed to pull it, to shoot Jun-young, to shoot Kwon, to kill everyone in this fucking ballroom. But Tae-young's hand landed on his shoulder, gentle, warning. "Sir," Tae-young whispered, "don't." Min-jae stood frozen while Kwon and Jun-young shook hands in front of everyone. While they announced their partnership, while the ballroom erupted in applause, while Min-jae's world collapsed for the second time in 2 days. He'd lost everything, again, and this time he'd done it to himself. Naomi had been right. He'd become a tool, desperate enough to be controlled, stupid enough to believe there was an easy path back to power. Min-jae turned and walked out of the ballroom. No one stopped him. He made it to the circular driveway before his legs gave out, dropped to his knees on expensive gravel, felt something fundamental shatter inside his chest. The Black Tiger of Gangnam, the most feared criminal in Asia, reduced to this, broken, beaten, destroyed by his own desperation. Tae-yang appeared beside him. "Sir, I'm done," Min-jae said. "Sir, I said I'm done." Min-jae looked up at his security chief. "I have nothing left. No empire, no reputation, no future. Jun-young and Kwon made sure of that." "You still have people who believe in you." "Why?" Min-jae's voice cracked. "I've led them to disaster twice now. I've compromised everything, surrendered everything. I'm a joke." "You're human." Tae-young knelt beside him. "You fell in love, made choices based on that love. In our world, that's usually fatal, but it doesn't have to be. Naomi was right. I should have chosen differently. Or maybe you chose correctly and just need better execution." Tae-young helped Min-jae stand. "Jun-young and Kwon think they've won. Let them think that. While they celebrate, we disappear. Regroup. Plan properly this time. Without desperation. Without compromising yourself." Min-jae felt something shift inside him. Not hope. Not yet. But something smaller. Something that felt like possibility. "And Naomi," he asked quietly, "is either still with you or she's not. Only one way to find out." They drove back to Seoul in silence. Min-jae stared out the window at the city he'd once controlled and felt like a ghost haunting his own life. When they reached the safe house where Naomi and Jessica were staying, Min-jae hesitated outside. What if she wouldn't see him? What if she'd already decided he was too far gone to save? He knocked anyway. The door opened. Naomi stood there in sweatpants and an oversized shirt, eyes red from crying, face exhausted. She looked at him for 3 seconds without speaking. Then she stepped aside, letting him in. Min-jae entered. The door closed behind him. "Did you do it?" Naomi asked quietly. "Did you kill Jun-young?" "No." "Why not?" "Because it was a trap. Kwon Jin-ho was partnering with him. The whole thing was designed to make me destroy myself publicly." Naomi closed her eyes. "I'm sorry. You were right about everything. I let desperation make me stupid. Let myself believe there was an easy path back to power. And it almost destroyed me completely." "Almost?" Min-jae moved closer to her. "I'm still here, still breathing, still have at least one person left who might not hate me entirely." Naomi opened her eyes, and Min-jae saw tears gathering. "I don't hate you. I'm furious with you, terrified for you, exhausted by you, but I don't hate you. Then help me." Min-jae's voice cracked. "Help me figure out how to come back from this. Not as the Black Tiger, not as someone's weapon, just as myself. Whatever that means now." Naomi stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Min-jae held her like she was the only thing keeping him standing upright. Which maybe she was. "We'll figure it out," she whispered against his chest. "Together. But Min-jae, you need to understand something. What? You can't keep choosing revenge and power over the people who love you. You can't keep thinking you have to be the monster to survive. Because eventually, that becomes all you are. And I can't love a monster. I can only love the man underneath. Min-jae held her tighter. What if there's no difference anymore? Then we find the difference. We rebuild it. We make you human again. Naomi pulled back to look at him. But that requires you actually wanting to be saved. Do you want that? Or do you want to keep destroying yourself, trying to reclaim something that's already gone? Min-jae looked at this woman. This impossible woman who'd survived his world, who'd killed to protect him, who was offering him salvation he didn't deserve, and made a choice that felt like jumping off a cliff without knowing if he'd land or fall forever. I want to be saved, he whispered. Then let me help you. How? Naomi's expression shifted into something fierce and absolutely certain. We don't fight Junyoung and Kwon on their terms. We don't try to reclaim your empire through violence. We do something they'll never expect. Which is? We walk away, completely, from all of it. Min-jae stared at her. That's impossible. Why? Because you don't walk away from this world. You die in it, or you rule it. Those are the only options. Then we create a third option. Naomi took his hands. We disappear. Take what resources you have left. Build something new somewhere far from Seoul. Something legitimate. Something that doesn't require us to constantly fight for survival. Junyoung and Kwon won't let me just leave. Then we make them think you're dead. Min-jae's mind raced. It was insane. Impossible. Required burning every bridge, abandoning every connection, starting completely over. It was also the only path forward that didn't end with him dead or imprisoned or becoming exactly the monster Naomi feared. If we do this, Min-jae said slowly, we can never come back. Everyone we know, everything I built, it all ends. I know. You're asking me to choose you over my entire identity. I'm asking you to choose yourself. The version of yourself that's more than just the black tiger. Naomi's voice went soft. I fell in love with that version, the one who saved my sister despite losing everything, the one who took a bullet for me, the one who's human underneath all the violence. That's the man I want to build a life with, not the crime lord, not the monster, just you. Min-jae felt something inside his chest crack wide open. For 2 years, he'd told himself love was weakness. Maybe he'd been wrong about that. Maybe love was the only thing strong enough to save him from himself. All right, he said, let's disappear. Naomi's face transformed with relief and hope, and something that looked like the beginning of forever. They started planning immediately, liquidating hidden assets, creating false identities, mapping routes out of South Korea that wouldn't trigger surveillance from any of the families. It would take days, maybe weeks, but it was possible, just barely possible. But first, Min-jae had one final move to make, because Park Junyoung and Kwon Jin-ho thought they'd won. And Min-jae was going to let them keep thinking that right up until the moment he proved them catastrophically wrong. Not through violence, through something far more devastating, through making them irrelevant completely. Min-jae picked up his phone and made a call that would change everything. The line connected after 2 rings. Seoul Metropolitan Police, how may I direct your call? Min-jae smiled coldly. I'd like to report extensive criminal activity, including detailed information about Park Junyoung's operations, Kwon Jin-ho's international trafficking networks, and evidence connecting both men to murders, extortion, and political corruption. I'm prepared to provide full testimony, documentation, and witness cooperation in exchange for immunity. The operator's voice sharpened. Who is this? This is Kang Min-jae, and I'm about to burn my entire world to the ground. The detective who arrived at Min-jae's penthouse 3 hours after that phone call was a woman in her late 40s with gray-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too much violence to be shocked by anything anymore. She introduced herself as Detective Shin Mi-kyung from the Serious Crimes Division and sat across from Min-jae with a recording device between them. You understand what you're offering, she said. Not a question. Complete cooperation. Every detail of my operations, names, locations, financial records, testimony against Park Junyoung, Kwon Jin-ho, and anyone else connected to their organizations. Min-jae's voice stayed steady. in exchange for immunity from prosecution and witness protection for myself and three others. Three others? Naomi Carter, Jessica Carter, and Kim Tae-yang. Detective Shin studied him carefully. You're aware that providing this information will make you a target for every criminal organization in Asia. I'm already a target? This makes it worse. Exponentially worse. Then it's a good thing I'm prepared to disappear completely. Shin leaned back in her chair. Walk me through what you're offering, starting with Park Jun-young. Min-jae spent the next 6 hours detailing 2 decades of criminal operations. He spoke in cold, precise terms about murders he'd ordered, territories he'd controlled, money he'd laundered through legitimate businesses, political figures he'd corrupted, international trafficking networks he'd facilitated. He told Detective Shin everything, every sin, every crime, every moment of violence that built his empire. And with each confession, Min-jae felt something lift from his chest. Not redemption. He'd never earned that. But something lighter. Something that felt distantly like honesty. Naomi sat beside him through the entire interrogation, her hand in his, her presence steady and grounding. She didn't flinch when he described eliminations. Didn't pull away when he detailed acts of brutality. She just held his hand and reminded him silently that confession wasn't the same as damnation. When Min-jae finally finished, dawn light was bleeding through the windows. Detective Shin sat surrounded by pages of notes, her expression unreadable. This is enough to dismantle organized crime in Seoul for a generation, she said quietly. Maybe longer. That's the idea. It's also enough to get you killed 1,000 different ways. I'm aware. Shin powered off her recording device. I need to take this to my superiors. Get authorization for the immunity deal. Coordinate with federal prosecutors. This will take time. How much time? Days? Maybe a week. Can you stay hidden that long? Min-jae nodded. I have safe houses Jun-young and Kwon don't know about. Use them. Don't contact anyone from your old life. Don't make any moves that draw attention. Shin stood, gathering her materials. If this works, you'll be the most valuable witness in Korean criminal history. But if it leaks before we're ready to move, you'll be dead before we can protect you. After she left, Min-jae sat in silence with Naomi while Seoul woke up around them. Traffic sounds drifted up from 60 floors below. Morning light transformed the city into something almost beautiful. Are you okay? Naomi asked quietly. Min-jae considered the question. I just confessed to enough crimes to spend multiple lifetimes in prison. Betrayed every person I've ever worked with, guaranteed that my name will be synonymous with treachery and organized crime forever. So no, I'm not okay. But I'm alive. And you're alive. That's more than I deserved after the last week. You're doing the right thing. The right thing feels like slow suicide. That's because it usually is, Naomi squeezed his hand, but it's still right. They relocated to a safe house in Gangbuk-gu that afternoon, a modest apartment registered under a corporate alias 3 layers removed from Min-jae's legitimate holdings. Tae-yang coordinated their security with the small team of men still loyal enough to die protecting them. Jessica stayed close, still recovering from her captivity, still processing everything that had happened. For 3 days, they waited. Min-jae monitored news channels obsessively, watching for any indication that Detective Shin's investigation had leaked. But Seoul continued its normal rhythm. Businesses operated. Traffic flowed. The criminal underworld conducted its affairs without any sign that their entire structure was about to collapse. On the 4th day, everything changed. Pre-dawn raids hit simultaneously across Seoul. Police tactical teams stormed locations throughout the city. Park Jun-young's estate, Kwon Jin-ho's corporate headquarters, warehouses, casinos, legitimate businesses that served as fronts. Helicopters circled overhead. Armored vehicles blocked streets. News cameras captured dozens of arrests as organized crime leadership was dragged out in handcuffs. Min-jae watched it all from his safe house, feeling something cold and absolute settle into place. This was real. Irreversible. Final. By noon, every major news outlet was running the story. The prosecution announced they'd secured testimony from a high-level informant detailing decades of criminal operations. Charges filed included murder, extortion, human trafficking, international arms dealing, money laundering, and political corruption spanning multiple administrations. Park Jun-young and Kwon Jin-ho were both in custody, denied bail, facing life imprisonment. The Black Tiger of Gangnam had destroyed them utterly, and in doing so, had destroyed himself. That evening, Detective Shin called. "You're clear to relocate. Witness protection protocols are in effect. We have identities prepared for all 4 of you." "Where?" Min-jae asked. "I can't tell you until you're in transit. Security protocol. But it's far from Korea. Far from Asia entirely. Somewhere you can actually disappear." Min-jae looked at Naomi, who nodded once. "When do we leave?" he asked. "Tonight. Transport arrives at your location at 10 p.m. Bring nothing except essentials. Everything else gets left behind." After the call ended, Min-jae walked through the safe house one final time. Years of his life reduced to a handful of clothes, some cash, and forged documents. Everything else, every material possession, every connection, every piece of his identity, abandoned. He found Naomi on the small balcony, staring at Seoul's nighttime lights. "Having second thoughts?" Min-jae asked, moving beside her. "About leaving?" "No." She glanced at him. "About whether we can actually build something real after all this? Constantly." "That's honest." "You asked for honesty. That's what I'm giving you." Naomi turned to face him fully. "I love you. I'm choosing you. But Min-jae, we're about to start completely over. New names, new lives, new identities. Everything we were gets erased. And I don't know if we survive that." Min-jae took her hands. "I don't know either, but I know I want to try. Even if it means never being the Black Tiger again, never having power or fear or control. Especially then." Min-jae pulled her against him. "I spent 20 years building an empire on violence. It made me rich and powerful and absolutely miserable. The only time I've ever felt human was with you. So if trying to build something real with you means giving up everything else, that's not even a choice." Naomi's arms wrapped around him tightly. "What if I'm not enough? What if normal life bores you? What if you wake up one day and resent me for everything you sacrificed? Then we'll deal with it together." Min-jae pressed his lips against her forehead. "I'm not going to pretend this will be easy. I'm not going to promise I won't have moments of regret. But Naomi, I've lived the alternative. I've been the monster. And it was empty and cold and slowly killing me. Whatever we build together has to be better than that." She pulled back to look at him, tears gathering in her eyes. "I'm terrified." "Me too." "But you're still doing this. Because the alternative is dying slowly while pretending to be something I'm not. And I'm done with that." At 10 p.m., 2 unmarked vehicles arrived. Detective Shin emerged from the first one, gesturing for them to load quickly. Min-jae, Naomi, Jessica, and Tae-young climbed into separate vehicles with minimal belongings. As they pulled away from the safe house, Min-jae took one last look at Seoul through tinted windows. The city where he'd been born, where he'd built an empire, where he'd fallen in love and lost everything and found something worth more than power. He'd never see it again. The thought should have hurt more than it did. They drove to a private airfield outside the city where a small jet waited with engines running. No customs, no passport control, no record that any of them had ever left Korean soil. Min-jae boarded the aircraft with Naomi's hand in his, feeling like he was stepping into a different life entirely. Which, he supposed, he was. The flight lasted 14 hours. They landed at a small airport in rural New Zealand just after dawn local time. Another unmarked vehicle waited. Another silent drive through countryside so green and empty it felt like a different planet. They arrived at a property 30 minutes outside a town called Queenstown. A modest house on several acres of land, surrounded by mountains and forests and absolute isolation. The kind of place where you could disappear completely and no one would ever think to look. Their new home, their new life, their new prison or salvation, depending on how the next years unfolded. Detective Shin had traveled with them on the flight. She handed Min-jae a folder containing their new identities as they stood outside the house. "Michael Carter," she said, reading from documentation. "American expatriate, software consultant working remotely, married to Naomi Carter, living in New Zealand for the lifestyle and scenery." She looked up. "That's your cover. Learn it. Live it. Never deviate from it." "And Tae-young?" Min-jae asked. "David Kim, your brother-in-law. Jessica's husband, actually." Shin handed documents to Tae-young. "You two got married 6 months ago, Moved here together to start fresh. It provides justification for why you're all living together. Taeyang and Jessica glanced at each other. Neither looked particularly comfortable with the arrangement, but neither protested. What about money? Naomi asked. Accounts have been established under your new identities, enough to live comfortably for several years while you figure out legitimate income. After that, you're on your own. Shin's expression softened slightly. I know this isn't easy. Starting over never is, but you're alive. That's more than most people in your position can say. After Shin left, the four of them stood in the driveway of their new home, staring at each other like strangers. Because in a way, they were Michael and Naomi Carter, David and Jessica Kim. Not Kang Min-jae and his associates, not the Black Tiger and the woman who loved him despite everything. Just four people trying to figure out how to be normal. The first weeks were brutal. Min-jae had spent 2 decades operating in a world of absolute clarity. Threats eliminated, problems solved through violence, every interaction transactional. Normal life had none of that structure. He woke up every morning with nothing to do. No operations to coordinate, no enemies to monitor, no empire requiring his attention, just empty hours stretching into empty days. Naomi found work at a local nonprofit helping refugees adjust to New Zealand life. Jessica started taking classes at a community college. Taeyang, David now, got a job doing private security for wealthy families in Queenstown. Min-jae tried to find purpose and mostly failed. He attempted software consulting like his cover story suggested. Lasted 3 days before admitting he had no real skills in that area. Tried learning to cook, burned everything. Attempted hiking in the mountains surrounding their property. Got lost twice. Normal life, he discovered, was significantly harder than running a criminal empire. 2 months in, Naomi found him sitting on their back porch at 3 a.m., staring at stars he'd never bothered noticing in Seoul. She sat beside him without speaking. I don't know how to do this, Min-jae said finally. Do what? Be normal. Be Michael Carter. Be someone who isn't defined by violence and power. He looked at her. I spent 20 years being one thing. Now I'm supposed to be something completely different, and I don't know how. Then maybe you stop trying to be something and just exist for a while. Naomi took his hand. You don't have to figure out your entire identity in 2 months. You just have to wake up each day and choose not to be the monster. Everything else can come slowly. What if slowly isn't fast enough? What if I wake up one day and realize I've made a terrible mistake? Then we deal with it, together. She squeezed his hand. But Min-jae, you need to understand something. The person you were in Seoul, the Black Tiger, he wasn't sustainable. He was slowly destroying you. This version might feel uncomfortable and uncertain, but at least it's honest. Honest feels like dying. Honest feels like living. You've just never tried it before. Min-jae let those words settle into him. Maybe she was right. Maybe the discomfort wasn't weakness or failure. Maybe it was just what growth felt like when you'd spent decades avoiding it. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, things started shifting. Min-jae began volunteering at a youth center in Queenstown, teaching self-defense classes to teenagers. The work was simple and undramatic, but watching kids learn to protect themselves triggered something in him, a sense of purpose that didn't require violence. He started reading again. Books he'd ignored during his years building an empire, philosophy, history, fiction that explored what it meant to be human. Each page felt like relearning a language he'd deliberately forgotten. He learned to cook properly, started hiking without getting lost, spent evenings with Naomi on their porch watching sunsets instead of monitoring criminal operations. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, Michael Carter became real. Not a cover story, not a disguise hiding Kang Min-jae, just a person trying to figure out how to live without destroying everything around him. 6 months after arriving in New Zealand, Naomi told him she was pregnant. They sat in their modest living room, test results on the coffee table between them, both too stunned to speak immediately. Say something, Naomi whispered finally. Min-jae stared at the test results, positive, definitive, life-changing. I don't know how to be a father, he said quietly. You didn't know how to be Michael Carter either. You're learning. This is different. Why? Because if I fuck this up, it's not just my life I'm destroying. It's an innocent person who didn't choose any of this. Naomi moved beside him, taking his hands. You're right. It is different. It's terrifying and overwhelming and completely irreversible. But Min-jae, you've survived worse than parenthood. You've survived being the most feared criminal in Asia and walking away from it. You can survive raising a child. What if I can't? What if the violence catches up with us? What if someone finds out who we really are? Then we deal with it, the same way we've dealt with everything else. Her voice went fierce. But we don't let fear stop us from building something real. We don't let your past destroy our future. We just keep living, keep trying, keep being better than we were. Min-jae looked at this woman who'd chosen him despite every reason to run, who'd survived his world and pulled him out of it, who was now carrying his child and trusting him not to destroy that too. All right, he said, let's do this. 7 months later, their daughter was born in a small hospital in Queenstown. 6 pounds, 4 ounces. Perfect fingers and toes, eyes that hadn't decided on a color yet, screaming lungs that filled the delivery room with sound. Min-jae held her for the first time with hands that had killed dozens of people, and felt something fundamental reorganize inside his chest. This tiny, fragile human trusted him completely, had no idea who he'd been, what he'd done, the empire he'd destroyed. She just existed, perfect and innocent and entirely dependent on him not to fail. The weight of that responsibility was crushing, and somehow it was exactly what he needed. They named her Grace, not for any particular reason, except it felt right. Grace Carter, American citizen born in New Zealand, daughter of Michael and Naomi Carter. No connection whatsoever to Kang Min-jae or the Black Tiger of Gangnam, just a baby starting life with parents determined to give her something better than they'd had. Parenthood was harder than anything Min-jae had ever experienced, harder than building an empire, harder than walking away from power, harder than surviving assassination attempts or criminal wars, because empire building had clear rules. Violence had predictable outcomes. Crime operated on logic, however twisted. An infant operated on chaos and biological need and developmental stages that made no logical sense. Grace cried at 3 a.m. for no reason Min-jae could determine. Refused to sleep unless held at specific angles. Required constant feeding, changing, monitoring, and attention that left both him and Naomi stumbling through days in exhausted hazes. Min-jae had once coordinated operations across 4 continents while maintaining absolute control. Now he couldn't figure out why his daughter was crying. It was humbling in ways violence had never been. But slowly, always slowly, he adapted. Learned to recognize different types of cries. Figured out feeding schedules and sleep patterns. Developed the ability to function on 3 hours of interrupted rest. Discovered reserves of patience he'd never known he possessed. And somewhere in the endless cycle of diapers and bottles and sleepless nights, Min-jae realized he was happy. Not the sharp, violent satisfaction of eliminating threats. Not the cold pleasure of expanding territory or accumulating power. Just quiet, domestic contentment. Holding his daughter while she slept against his chest. Watching Naomi sing lullabies in their modest home. Building something small and fragile and infinitely precious. On Grace's first birthday, they had a small celebration. Just the 4 adults and 1 confused toddler who didn't understand why everyone was making such a fuss. Tae-young and Jessica had grown genuinely close over the year of their arranged marriage, their relationship evolving from convenience to something that looked suspiciously like actual love. After Grace fell asleep, the 4 of them sat on the back porch with wine and beer and comfortable silence. "Do you ever miss it?" Tae-young asked quietly. "Seoul, the operations, the power." Min-jae considered the question honestly. "Sometimes. Usually late at night when Grace is crying and I'm exhausted and I remember that I used to command respect through violence instead of changing diapers. But then morning comes and she smiles at me and I realize this is infinitely better. Even knowing you'll never be the Black Tiger again, especially knowing that." Min-jae looked at his former security chief. The Black Tiger was empty, powerful, and feared and absolutely hollow inside. Michael Carter might be ordinary, but at least he's real. At least he's building something that matters. Jessica spoke up. "Do you think they're still looking for you?" "Probably. Junyoung and Kwan both got life sentences, but their organizations survived. Someone out there knows I betrayed them and wants revenge. Min-jae sipped his beer. But we're ghosts now. No trail, no connection. Just another American family living in New Zealand. As long as we stay invisible, we stay safe. Naomi's hand found his. And if we don't stay invisible, then we deal with it. Same as everything else. They sat in comfortable silence while stars wheeled overhead and their daughter slept peacefully inside. This was their life now. Not exciting or dramatic or powerful, just real, honest, human. And for the first time in his life, Min-jae understood that was enough. Years passed with the strange speed that comes from daily routines. Grace learned to walk, then talk, then argue with impressive vocabulary for a toddler. They added another child, a son named Daniel. Moved to a slightly larger house when the first became cramped. Established rhythms and traditions and the kind of normal family life Min-jae had once thought impossible. He continued teaching self-defense classes, started a small consulting business, helping local businesses improve their security protocols. Nothing glamorous or particularly profitable, but enough to contribute financially and give him purpose beyond parenthood. Naomi advanced at her nonprofit, eventually becoming their director. Jessica finished her degree and started working as a counselor for trauma survivors. Tae-young built a successful security company that provided legitimate services throughout the region. They became real people with real lives, not criminals hiding, not witnesses waiting for discovery, just people living. On the 5-year anniversary of their arrival in New Zealand, Min-jae took Naomi to a restaurant overlooking Lake Wakatipu. They left Grace and Daniel with Tae-young and Jessica, dressed in nice clothes for the first time in months, and pretended to be sophisticated adults instead of exhausted parents. Over dinner, Naomi asked, "Do you ever regret it, giving up everything?" Min-jae looked at this woman who'd saved him from himself, who'd given him 2 children and a reason to be better than his nature, who'd chosen him despite every reason to run. "I regret a lot of things," he said honestly. "I regret the people I killed, the lives I destroyed building my empire, the years I wasted thinking power was the same as purpose." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "But I don't regret this. Us. The life we've built. If I could go back and change one thing, it would be finding you sooner. Before I became the Black Tiger. Before violence was the only language I spoke." Tears gathered in Naomi's eyes. "That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me." "I've had 5 years to practice being human. I'm getting better at it." She laughed, squeezing his hand. "You really are." They finished dinner and walked along the lakefront, watching moonlight reflect off calm water. Min-jae pulled Naomi against him, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. "I love you," he said quietly. "I know." "No, I mean, I actually love you. Not the desperate, obsessive thing I felt in soul. That was possession disguised as emotion. This is different. This is knowing you're a separate person with your own life and choosing to build something together anyway. This is waking up every day and deciding you're worth the effort of being better." Naomi pulled back to look at him. "Michael Carter is surprisingly articulate for a software consultant." Min-jae smiled. "I've been reading a lot of philosophy books." "I've noticed." She reached up, touching his face gently. "You're a good man. I know you don't always believe that. I know you still have nightmares about who you used to be. But Min-jae, you're good. You're kind. You're trying. That's all anyone can ask. I'm trying because of you, because you believed I could be more than a monster. I believed it because it was always true. You just needed to see it yourself." They stood by the lake, holding each other, watching stars reflect on dark water. And Min-jae felt something he'd spent his entire life chasing and never finding. Peace. Not the absence of threat, not the illusion of control. Just acceptance that this life, small and ordinary and impossibly precious, was exactly where he belonged. The years continued their relentless march forward. Grace started school, bringing home drawings and stories about friends and questions about why their family talked about Korea but never visited. Min-jae and Naomi developed careful cover stories. Immigration for work, missing the homeland but building a new life. Standard expatriate narratives that explained without revealing. Daniel grew from infant to toddler to small child with his father's dark eyes and his mother's fierce intelligence. Tae-yang and Jessica officially married in a small ceremony after years of pretending their arrangement was real until it actually became so. Their own daughter arrived 2 years later. They built a community. Not the violent hierarchy of criminal organizations, but genuine friendships with neighbors and colleagues who knew them as Michael and Naomi Carter, not Kang Min-jae and the woman who saved him. And slowly, the past receded. Not forgotten. Never forgotten. Min-jae still woke some nights from dreams of soul, of violence, of the man he'd been. But those moments became less frequent, less consuming, just echoes of a life that felt increasingly distant. On their 10th anniversary in New Zealand, Detective Shin called. The sound of her voice after years of silence sent ice through Min-jae's veins. "Michael," she said using his new name. "I'm sorry to contact you after so long, but there's something you need to know." Min-jae's hand tightened on the phone. "What happened?" "Park Jun-young died in prison last month. Cancer." Kwon Jin-ho followed 2 weeks later. "Heart attack." Shin paused. "The leadership you testified against is gone. The organizations they built have splintered into ineffective fragments. The testimony you provided fundamentally changed organized crime in Korea." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because it means you're safe. Truly safe. The people who had the most reason to hunt you are dead. Their successors have bigger problems than chasing down a decade-old grudge. You can stop looking over your shoulder now." Min-jae sat down heavily, processing this information. "We're actually safe as anyone ever is." Shin's voice softened. "You did a brave thing, Michael, walking away from power, testifying against your own world. It destroyed organized crime in Seoul more effectively than 20 years of police work, so thank you. I didn't do it for you. I did it to survive. Motivation doesn't matter. Results do. And the result is a lot of people are safer because of choices you made." She paused. "I hope you've built something good with the life we gave you." "I have." "Then that's all that matters." After the call ended, Min-jae sat in his home office staring at the phone. Naomi found him there 20 minutes later. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately. Min-jae looked up at her. "Jun-young and Kwon are dead. Shin says we're safe now. Actually safe." Naomi's hand went to her mouth. "They can't hurt us anymore?" "No one can hurt us anymore. The people who knew who I really was are gone. We're just Michael and Naomi Carter, permanently." Tears gathered in Naomi's eyes. "We're free." Min-jae stood and pulled her into his arms. "We've been free for 10 years. We just didn't know it yet." They held each other while a decade of tension finally released. All the watching, the caution, the fear that someday their past would catch up with them. It was gone. Just gone. That evening, they gathered everyone together. Tae-young, Jessica, Grace, Daniel, and Tae-young's daughter, Emma, and told them the truth, not the full truth. Grace and Daniel were still too young for complete honesty, but enough, that their family had started in difficult circumstances, that they'd made hard choices to build something better, that they'd been afraid for a long time, but weren't anymore. Grace, now 10 years old and impossibly perceptive, asked, "Were you bad people before?" Min-jae knelt down to her eye level. "I was. Your mother wasn't, but I was. I did things I'm not proud of, hurt people, made terrible choices. And then I met your mother, and she showed me how to be better. Are you still bad?" "I try not to be. Every day. That's all any of us can do." Grace considered this seriously. "Okay, but you're a good dad now, right?" Min-jae felt his throat tighten. "I try to be." "Then that's what matters." She hugged him fiercely. "I don't care what you were before. You're my dad." Min-jae held his daughter while tears he'd been suppressing for years finally broke free. Not tears of grief or loss or regret, just release. The final shedding of a past that had defined him for too long. That night, after the children were asleep, Min-jae and Naomi sat on their back porch. The same porch where they'd spent countless evenings over the years, where they'd figured out parenthood, where they'd built their life together one conversation at a time. "No regrets?" Naomi asked quietly. Min-jae thought about Seoul, about power and fear and the empire he'd built on violence, about the Black Tiger of Gangnam who'd commanded respect through terror and died slowly from emotional starvation. Then he thought about Grace's homework on their kitchen table, Daniel's toys scattered across the living room floor, the modest consulting business that paid their bills, the self-defense classes where teenagers learned to protect themselves, the small, ordinary, infinitely precious life they'd created from the ashes of his former existence. No regrets, he said. Not one. Naomi leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. I love you, Michael Carter. I love you too. They sat in comfortable silence while stars wheeled overhead and their children slept peacefully inside. This was their life now. Not dramatic or powerful or newsworthy, just real. And real, Minjae had learned over 10 years of trying, was infinitely more valuable than any empire built on blood and fear. The Black Tiger of Gangnam was dead. Kang Min-jae was a ghost. But Michael Carter was alive and trying and human and desperately imperfect and building something that mattered more than power ever could. Sometimes love wasn't supposed to be safe or predictable or neat. Sometimes it arrived covered in blood and violence, looking at you like you were the only reason it remembered how to be human. And sometimes, if you were lucky enough and brave enough and desperate enough to try, that love could save you from yourself completely. Min-jae had been all three, and it had made all the difference. Years from now, when Grace and Daniel were old enough to understand, he would tell them the full truth. About Seoul, about the empire, about the monster their father had been and the choices that led him to become someone better. But for now, this moment was enough. A man who'd learned to be human. A woman who'd taught him how. Two children who'd never know the violence that preceded their existence. A life built on honesty instead of fear. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And real was all he'd ever actually needed. Min-jae squeezed Naomi's hand once, feeling her squeeze back, and let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, people like him could actually find redemption. Not through grand gestures or heroic sacrifices. Just through waking up every day and choosing to be slightly better than they'd been the day before. One small choice at a time, one honest moment at a time, one breath at a time, until the monster faded and only the man remained, human, flawed, trying. And finally, miraculously, free.